Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back about 3,500 years, not to a grand battle or a royal court, but to something far more fundamental, something you could almost smell in the evening air, a field of golden wheat shimmering under an Egyptian sun. We're exploring the surprisingly complex world of ancient Egyptian granaries. Now, I know what you're rethinking, bureaucracy and grain storage. Sounds like the ultimate sleep aid, right? And you're not wrong. But this mundane system was the engine that powered the pyramids, the invisible skeleton that held a civilization together for millennia. Your journey begins at the absolute ground floor. As a farmer, and the little head's miner, you might not survive the first day. The heat, the blisters, the overseers. It's a tough gig. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel, and I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see our little community scattered across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The light is the first thing you notice. It's not the harsh white glare of midday yet, but is soft, pale gold that spills over the eastern horizon, catching the tops of the date palms that line the canal. The air is thick, humid, and carries the scent of the Riviera, mix of damp earth, silt, and green, living things. This is your world, a narrow, vibrant strip of life pressed between two endless expanses of silent, red desert. The ancients called this place Kemet, the Black Land, named for the rich, dark soil the Nile River gifted you every single year. You're already awake. Of course, sleep is a luxury for the short, cool hours of the night. You put on a simple linen loincloth, the standard work attire for pretty much everyone, and step out of your mud-minus brick home. The ground is cool beneath your bare feet. A few paces away, the field awaits. It's a breathtaking sight, a sea of ripe barley, heads heavy and bowing in the gentle morning breeze. This is the culmination of a year's work, of hope, of reliance on the gods in the great river. This is the season of Shimul, the harvest. In your hand, you hold your primary tool. It's not a single, gleaming piece of metal. That's a tool for the wealthy, or for soldiers. Yours is a work of practical art, a curved, sickle-minus shaped piece of wood, and set along its inner edge, held in place with bitumen or resin, or a series of jagged, razor-minus, sharp flint flakes. It's surprisingly effective. This is a classic piece of old kingdom tech that has served farmers for generations. You join the others, your brothers, your cousins, your neighbors. This isn't a solitary job. Harvest is a frantic, communal race against time, spoilage, and pests. You wade into the barley, the stalks rustling against your legs, tickling your skin, and then the rhythm begins. Grab a fistful of stalks, pull them taut, slice. Your back bends, your arm swings in a smooth, practice door. The flint teeth bite through the dry stems with a satisfying, crisp jar. You lay the cup bundle down, take a step, and repeat. Grab, pull, slice. Within an hour, the sun has climbed higher, and its warmth becomes a heavy blanket on your shoulders. Sweat drips from your brow, tracing dusty paths down your cheeks. In the distance, you can hear the low, rhythmic chanting of another group of workers, a harvest song to keep the pace. A melody as old as the fields themselves. The lyrics are simple, praising the strength of the oxen that will later tread the grain, or giving thanks to Happy, the god of the inundation. And as you work, your mind drifts. You look at this vast expanse of grain, the source of your bread, your beer, your very existence. A mainstream historical truth of your time is that none of this would be here without the AKHET, the season of inundation, when the Nile swelled and covered these lands, depositing a fresh layer of life minus giving salt. When the waters receded, they left this black, fertile soil, the foundation of everything. Just beyond this paradise, you can see the beginning of the Dasharat, the red land of the desert, a place of chaos and death. You live on an island of order in a sea of entropy. But then, A quiet, more complex thought surfaces. As your pile of cut barley grows, you wonder how much of this is truly yours. You see the overseer, standing near the edge of the field, the GS not sweating. He holds a wooden pallet and a reed brush, making notes. He represents an authority far beyond this village local temple, or a powerful noble, or perhaps even the great god-minus king himself, the pharaoh. The grain belongs, in theory, to the land, and the land belongs to the gods, and the pharaoh is their representative. You are simply its steward, its caretaker. Historians centuries from now will still be debating the precise nature of your status. Are you a free farmer paying a tax? Are you a tenant, essentially renting this land for a share of the crop? Or are you a serf, bound to this soil with little say in your own fate? The answer is probably a messy combination of all three, shifting from dynasty to dynasty. But right now, all you know for sure is that a significant portion of what you're recutting will not end up in your own storage bin. The sun is at its peak now. It's brutally hot. You pause to drink some lukewarm water from a clay jar, the porous buttery cooling the liquid slightly as it evaporates. You look at the mountain of grain you and your family have reaped. It's a beautiful, golden achievement. The hard part is over. You might think that you'd be wrong. The harvest is just the first step. Now, this grain must begin its own journey, a journey that will take it away from this field, down dusty paths, and into the cool, dark, and meticulously organized heart of the Egyptian state, the granary. The sun, once your adversary, is now a welcome partner. The piles of cut barley lie waiting on the threshing floor, a large, circular patch of earth that has been swept clean and pounded flat until it's almost as hard as stone. This isn't work you do alone. Several families have gathered their harvests here, and the air, which was once filled with the rhythmic slicing of sickles, is now thick with dust and the lowing of cattle. The next stage of the journey from plant to provision has begun, separating the edible grain from the stock and husk. You watch as two oxen, yoked together, are led onto the pile of cuttings. A boy, perhaps your nephew, prods them gently with a stick, guiding them in a slow, endless circle. The heavy hooves act as living millstones, trampling the stalks, breaking the heads of the barley, and freeing the precious kernels. It's a slow, dusty process. The chaff, the dry bits of husk and straw, that's kicked up into the air, creating a hazy golden fog that catches the afternoon light. It gets in your eyes, your nose, the back of your throat. This is the taste of wealth. As the oxen plod on, you and the others take up long, wooden pitchforks. Your job is to turn the pile, ensuring the stalks on the bottom make their way to the top to be trampled anew. There's a strange sort of dance to it, a coordinated effort to keep the animals moving and the grain churning. From a distance, an observer might see only chaos, but up close, there's a clear, established system. This is a mainstream historical fact, so common it's painted on tomb walls. The use of animal labor to thresh grain has been the way of things for as long as anyone can remember. After what feels like an eternity, the overseer, who has been observing from a comfortable spot in the shade, gives a nod. The oxen are led away, leaving behind a messy carpet of crushed straw and liberated grain. Now for the most delicate part of the operation, winnowing. You pick up a different tool, a wide, shallow wooden scoop. You fill it with the threshed mixture, take a deep breath, and, waiting for a gust of wind from the river, you toss the contents high into the air. It's a moment of pure magic. The heavy, valuable barley grains fall almost straight back down, landing in a growing pile at your feet. But the chaff, light and worthless, is caught by the breeze and carried away, drifting like a cloud of golden dust before settling some distance off. You repeat the motion, over and over, toss, let the wind do its work, and watch the pile of clean grain grow. It's a partnership with the air itself, a purification rite that separates sustenance from waste. Finally, it is done. Before you lies a mound of clean, tail-minus gold barley. This is your family's yield, but it's not yours to keep, not all of it. The overseer consults his notes, then directs you and your brothers to start bagging it. The bags aren't fancy. They are sacks of rough woven linen or reed fibers, sturdy and practical. You scoop the grain in, the kernels making a soft, whispering sound as they fill the bag. You heave the first one onto your shoulder. It's incredibly heavy, a dead weight that presses down on your bones. The reality of your labor, in its most concentrated form. The transportation is waiting. Not grand barges or wheeled carts, those are for the truly important. Your transport is the unsung hero of the Egyptian economy, the donkey. Several of them stand patiently, occasionally flicking their ears to ward off flies. Here's a little tidbit of information that often gets lost between the grand monuments. Without the donkey, the entire logistical network of the state would collapse. They carried grain, stone, trade goods, and messages. They were so vital that there were officials whose entire job was to manage the state's donkey herds. You load the heavy sacks onto the donkey's backs, to per animal, balance carefully. Then, with a final gulp of water, you begin the next phase of your journey. You leave the familiar sights of your village behind and join a slow moving procession on the main path that runs parallel to the Nile. It's not really a road, nor a wide, dusty track, beaten smooth by millennia of foot traffic. You're not alone. In front of you and behind you are other families, other donkeys, all laden with the same precious cargo. It's a slow pilgrimage of taxation. The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. You've walked this path before, but never this far. You're heading towards the regional administrative center, the home of the governor and, most importantly, the pharaoh's great granary. You've only ever heard stories about it. A structure as vast as a palace, with walls so high they touch the sky. And this is where historians today still find themselves guessing. Was this your first stop? Or was there a smaller, village-level silo where you dropped off your grain, which was then collected by state officials? The administrative papier that have survived often describe the grand, state-level movements of grain. But the specifics of this first mile from the farmer's field are less clear. The system was likely a patchwork, varying from region to region, dynasty to dynasty. For you, in this moment, all you know is that you're walking towards a destination that represents an authority you can feel but have never truly seen. After another hour of walking, as the sky turns a deep, bruised purple, you see it. It appears first as a solid, dark line against the horizon, darker than the surrounding landscape. It's not a building, not in the way your house is a building. It's a presence, a massive, windowless brick wall, far taller and thicker than anything in your village. It seems to stretch on forever. This is the outer wall of the granary complex. Your journey along the dusty path is over, but as you stare up at that imposing barrier, a knot of apprehension tightens in your stomach. The most difficult part of your day, you sense, is about to begin. You guide your weary donkeys through a tall, narrow gateway in the immense wall. The moment you step through, the world transforms. The relative peace of the country path evaporates, replaced by a controlled, purposeful bedlam. The air is thick with a fine haze of golden dust, catching the slanted rays of the setting sun. The sounds are overwhelming the impatient braying of dozens of donkeys, the sharp commands of overseers, the constant, sibilant whisper of grain being poured from sacks into measuring vessels, and the rhythmic thud of those sacks being dropped and stacked. This is not a single building, as you had imagined. It's a city unto itself. Before you lies a vast, open courtyard, bustling with activity. Surrounding it are the granaries themselves. Some are huge, rectangular warehouses with flat roofs where men are walking, checking for cracks. Others are shaped like giant beehives, conical silos made of mud miners brick and plaster, with small openings near the top for filling and at the bottom for dispensing. Historians would later discover that the shape of these silos wasn't just for show. The conical design helped to keep the grain packed tightly, reducing air exposure and slowing spoilage. You are a farmer. Your world is one of soil, water, and sun. Here, you are utterly out of your element. Men move with a confidence you don't possess, following invisible lines of authority. Everything seems to have a place, a purpose. You are just one small, interchangeable part of a long, dusty procession. here to deliver your tribute. An official with a stern face and a short kilt points you toward a queue. You join the line, stroking your donkey's neck to soothe it, though you're mostly trying to soothe yourself. And then you see him, at the head of the queue, seated in the shade of a linen canopy. Is the reason this entire place functions. The scribe. He is the embodiment of a different world. He sits cross-legged on a clean reed mare, a posture of serene authority you've only seen in statues. He wears a kilt of fine, white linen, unstained by dirt or sweat. While everyone around him is toiling under the sun, he is still, composed, and, most importantly, clean. His power isn't in his muscles, but in his mind and in the tools he holds. Across his lap rests a sheet of pale papyrus. In one hand, he holds his scribe's palette. It's a long, thin piece of wood, a potent symbol of his elite status. You can see two small, carved-out hollows at one end, one holding a cake of black ink made from carbon, the other a cake of reed ink from ochre. They slender, reed-brushed, its tip chewed to the perfect fineness, is tucked into a slot along the palette's length. This single object is a license to operate the machinery of the state. When it's your turn, you stand there awkwardly. The overseer who traveled with your group steps forward and speaks to the scribe, reporting the origin of your grain, your village, your plot of land. The scribe doesn't look at you. His gaze is fixed on the papyrus. He dips his brush into a small pot of water, rubs it onto the black ink cake, and then, with practiced, elegant strokes, his hand begins to move. The scratching sound of the reed on the papyrus is sharp and clear amidst the dull noise of the courtyard. It is the sound of reality being created. An assistant, a young boy with an eager face, takes a small wooden scoop and plunges it into one of your sacks, bringing a sample of the barley to the scribe. The scribe barely glances at it, giving a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Quality acceptable. He asks a short question, his voice calm and level. How many sacks? The overseer answers. The scribe's hand moves again, recording the number in the strange, bird-like symbols of the written language. This is the central, unassailable truth of your world. What the scribe writes down becomes fact. Your year of hard labor, the sweat dripping from your brow, the calluses on your hands, all of it, is now reduced to a few dark marks on a pale sheet. And as you watch him, a new, unsettling thought takes root. Is he honest? The amount you harvested seems to shrink in this place of official measurements and records. Historians centuries from now will pore over administrative documents, finding records of court cases against officials accused of corruption, of scribes altering ledgers to skim a little off the top for themselves. The debate will rage in quiet university halls. How systemic was this corruption? Was there an accepted, unofficial spillage tax that every official took? Or were these isolated cases? For you, in this moment, the academic debate is a terrifying, personal reality. You are completely at his mercy. His word, written in ink, will be believed over your spoken one 100 times out of 100. With a final flick of his brush, he adds a total, perhaps in reed ink for emphasis. He looks up, not at you, but at the official next to you, and gives a dismissive wave of his hand. You are done. You have been processed. Another official directs you and your donkeys toward the gaping maw of one of the beehive silos. You and your brothers heave the heavy sacks to the base, where other workers take them, carrying them up around to pour the contents inside. Your grain disappears into the cool, silent darkness, joining a mountain of wealth belonging to the state. You receive no token, no receipt. The only proof of your transaction is on a piece of papyrus you will never be allowed to read. Leading your lightened donkeys back towards the gate, you cast one last look over your shoulder. The scribe is still there, an island of calm in the swirling chaos. He is already focused on the next farmer, his pen moving, turning another family's sweat into a neat column of figures. And in that moment, the exhaustion of the day is replaced by a flicker of something else. Not just fear, not just resentment, but a spark of desperate, audacious ambition. You don't want to be the farmer in the sun anymore. You want to be the one in the shade. The walk back to your village is quiet, Your donkey steps lighter, but your mind is heavy. The image of the scribe is burned into your memory, his clean kilt, his calm authority, the absolute power he wielded with a simple reed brush. For the next few days, as you work in the fields, clearing the stubble and preparing the land for the next cycle, the thought gnaws at you. The path of the farmer is a circle, planting, flooding, harvesting, and surrendering a portion of that harvest, year after year. It is a life of back-minus breaking labor with little hope for change. The path of the scribe, however, is a line. It leads upwards. Your uncle is a man of some small standing in the village. He.S. a stonemason who has worked on the local temple, and through that, he knows people. He has seen the ambition simmering in your eyes since your trip to the Granary. One evening, as you share a simple meal of flatbread and lentils, he watches you stare blankly at the wall. Lost in thought, he sighs. He knows what you're thinking is foolish, a dream far beyond your station. The scribe class is elite, a world away from the dusty fields. Entry is usually through family connections. A scribe's son becomes a scribe. But your uncle has a sliver of an opportunity. A distant cousin of his wife is a junior scribe, not at the Grand Granary, but in a smaller administrative office attached to the temple. It's a humble position, mostly copying inventories of temple offerings, jars of beer, loaves of bread, bolts of linen. This scribe, whose name is Panto, owes your uncle a favor for some particularly fine carving work he did on a shrine. It's a long shot, a truly monumental long shot, but your uncle, seeing the fire in you that he recognizes from his own youth, agrees to speak to him. The wait is agonizing. A week passes. You go about your chores, your body on autopilot, your mind elsewhere. Then, one evening, your uncle comes to you. Tento has agreed. He is willing to take you on, not as a student, but as an assistant, a gopher. You'll be cleaning his writing equipment, mixing his ink, running messages. In exchange, he will consider teaching you the rudiments of reading and writing. There is no pay. In fact, your family will have to provide you with food, essentially paying for this privilege. It means one less pair of hands in the field, a real sacrifice for your family. Your father is furious. To him, this is an absurd fantasy. He sees it as a betrayal of their way of life, an insult to the honest labor that has sustained your family for generations. A farmer's son is a farmer, he says, his voice rough with anger and disappointment. You want to play with ink like a noble. Who do you think you are? But your mother, who has watched too many of her children grow weak from fevers and toil, sees a different path. A path away from the relentless sun and the punishing physical labor. She quietly persuades your father. This is a chance, however small, for a son to escape the cycle of hardship. This debate, the tension between tradition and ambition, is a story that has played out in millions of households throughout human history. And so, it is decided. You pack a small bundle of change of loincloth, a few dried figs, and a water skin. The next morning, before the sun rises, you say a quiet goodbye to your family. As you walk away from the mud miners, brick home you've always known, you feel a terrifying mix of exhilaration and dread. You are stepping off the well-minus trodden path of your ancestors and into a completely unknown world. You meet Pento in the shadow of the temple. He is younger than you expected, perhaps only in his early 20s, but he carries himself with the quiet confidence of the literate class. He looks you up and down, his expression unreadable. H.E.S. not unkind, but H.E.S. not warm either. He is a busy man, and you are, for now, a burden. He leads you into a small, windowless room at the back of a temple out buttling. The air is cool and smells of old papiers and dust. This will be your world now. Your first task is simple grind charcoal for blacking. Tenta hands you a small block of acacia with charcoal and a smooth, flat stone palette. You are to grind it into the finest possible powder. It's tedious, messy work. Your fingers are soon black with soot. As you grind, you watch him. He is hunched over a document, his reed brush flying across the page, his lips moving slightly as he murmurs the words to himself. This was a common practice. Even silent reading was often accompanied by quiet vocalization. For weeks, this is your life: grinding ink, cleaning pilates, fetching water, delivering messages on scraps of broken pottery known as ostracola notepads of the ancient world. You are invisible, a silent shadow in the corner of the room. Tanta rarely speaks to you, except to give an order. You begin to despair. Was your father right? Is this all your ambition amounts to, being a servant to a man not much older than yourself? Then, one afternoon, Tanta finishes his work early. He seems to be in a good mood. He beckons you over. He takes a piece of broken pottery and, with his brush, draws a simple symbol, an L. This, he says, his voice flat and business minus light, is M. He then draws a wavy line. This is M. He hands you a spare brush and points to a pile of ostraca shards. Practice. Your hand trembles as you take the brush. It feels alien in your calloused fingers, so used to the heft of a sickle or a pitchfork. You dip it in the watery ink and try to copy the owl. Your first attempt is a clumsy, smudged blob. Your second is no better. The elegant curves and sharp lines that Tanta created with ease seem impossible to replicate. Tanta watches you for a moment, a faint, almost pitying smile on his lips. The farmer's hand is strong, he says, but is not subtle. You will need to unlearn everything. He leaves you to it. As the light fades outside, you sit there, surrounded by dozens of failed owls and crooked water lines. Your back aches from leaning over, your fingers are stained with ink, and your heart is filled with a new kind of despair. The chasm between the field and the scribe's palette is far wider than you ever imagined. But as you look at your last, slightly less wobbly attempt at an owl, a tiny flicker of determination returns. You will not fail. You will unlearn. Your first day as a scribal apprentice, though no one calls you, that is a lesson in humility. Your master, the young scribe whose name you learn is an NI, doesn't greet you. He simply points to a corner of the small, stuffy office space HES been allotted within the granary complex. Your job, for now, is to observe and to be useful in the most menial ways possible. Your first task, preparing the tools of your new trade. You think back to Tanta, grinding his ink, and realize you are starting again from the very beginning. And then I hand you a lumpy, dark cake of ink. This is the standard black ink, made from finely ground carbon, usually soot scraped from cooking vessels or lamps mixed with a binder. A light gum Arabic solution derived from the acacia tree. It's a simple, effective recipe that has been used for centuries. Your job is to take a small piece of this cake, place it on a stone pallet, and, with a few drops of water, grind it into a smooth, liquid paste of the perfect consistency. Too thick, and it will clog the brush. Too thin, and it will run on the papers, creating a blurry, unreadable mess. It's harder than it looks. Your first few attempts are failures. Inanoi, without looking up from his own word, simply scrapes your botched efforts into a waste pot and gestures for you to start again. He is a harsh teacher, but, in his own way, he is teaching you the most fundamental lesson of the scribe precision. There is no room for almost right in the world of records and numbers. As you finally produce a small pool of ink that meets his silent approval, you feel a ridiculous surge of pride. You haven't written a single symbol, but you have made the substance of writing itself. Next, you learn about the reading. This is reserved for special purposes, for headings, for marking the start of a new section, for totals, or for highlighting important numbers like deficits. It's made from ground ochre, a natural clay earth pigment, mixed with the same binder. It adds a visual hierarchy to the document, a way of guiding the reader's eye. A small but clever piece of information design. Then, you are introduced to the heart of your new world papers. In an I unrolls a small, fresh sheet, and the scent fills the room, a dry, slightly sweet, plant minus like smell. He lets you touch it. It's lighter than you imagined, but stiff and strong. He explains, in a clipped, bored tone, how it's made. This isn't a mainstream history lesson for you. It's vital professional knowledge. The papyrus plant, the tall reed that grows in the marshy shallows of the Nile Delta, is the key. The outer green rind is stripped away. and the inner pith is cut into thin, vertical strips. These strips are then laid side minus by minus side on a hard, wet surface, overlapping slightly. A second layer is placed on top, at a right angle to the first. Then, it's hammered. The pressure and the natural sticky sap of the plant itself fuse the strips together into a single, cohesive sheet. After being pressed and dried in the sun, the surface is polished smooth with a stone or a piece of ivory. You realize that a sheet of papier is a manufactured miracle. Unlike the clumsy ostracur you've been practicing on, this is a purpose-built medium for knowledge. It's expensive. A single roll of papiers might cost the equivalent of a month's wages for a laborer. Wasting it is not an option. This is why you and all other apprentices start their training on cheap, disposable materials like broken pottery or limestone flakes. You won't be allowed to write on real papiers for a very long time. Your most important tool, after your brain, is the reed brush. And then I shows you his. It's a stem from a specific type of rush, Juncus mauritius, which grows by the river. One end is cut at a sharp angle. Then, the scribe chews on it carefully, separating the fibers to create a fine, brush-like tip. The quality of the tip determines the fineness of the script. A master scribe could create a tip capable of producing incredibly delicate, hairline strokes. He gives you a fresh reed and tells you to prepare it. You chew on it, but your clumsy efforts result in a frayed, splayed mess. He sighs, takes it from you, and with a few precise pinches and chews, creates a usable, if not perfect, point. You will learn, he says, and it's the closest thing to encouragement he has offered. A strange and wonderful piece of trivia from your new world is the scribe's kit itself. It's a standardized set. The wooden pallet with its inkwells, a leather pouch or a hollowed minus-out tube for holding spare reeds, and a small pot for water. These three items, often tied together with a string, form a sort of hieroglyph themselves, the symbol for scribe or to write. It is an icon of an entire profession, instantly recognizable. As the days turn into weeks, this little room becomes your universe. You learn the routines. You grind the ink, clean the letters, prepare the brushes. You listen to an NI as he dictates letters or murmurs figures to himself. You start to recognize the shapes of certain words and numbers. Even if you can't fully read them yet, you are an outsider looking in, learning the language of power from the ground up. Historians today still puzzle over the exact curriculum of these informal apprenticeships. Unlike the formal scribal schools that left behind textbooks of practice exercises, this on-the-minus job training was likely far more practical and less structured. Did an NI follow a set plan, or did he just teach you what was needed for the day's work? The evidence suggests it was largely the latter. You had learned the symbols for barley, emmer wheat, zerk, and day long before you learned the symbols for God or eternity. Your education was being shaped by the very specific, mundane needs of the granary. One afternoon, a messenger arrived with a rolled papier scroll, sealed with a small dab of wet clay and impressed with a seal. This is an official directive from higher authority. An NI breaks the seal carefully, unrolls the scroll, and begins to read. His brow furrows. He looks at his own ledgers, then back at the scroll. He sighs in frustration. He dips his brush in the reed ink and makes a sharp, angry minus-looking mark in his margin. You don't know what the message says, but you understand this even for a scribe. There is always someone higher up the chain. The written word gives power, but it also conveys orders. As you watch him, you realize that becoming a scribe isn't the end of the journey. It's just the beginning of a much longer, more complicated path, and for the first time, you feel a genuine sense of purpose. You will master this craft, not just to escape the fields, but to understand and navigate this complex world of ink and authority. Your real education begins not with grand literature or religious texts, but with the brutal, unforgiving logic of numbers. In an hour, having finally decided you are capable of more than grinding ink, begins to teach you the foundation of all bureaucracy, arithmetic. And you quickly discover that ancient Egyptian mathematics is both brilliantly simple and mind-minus, bending like complicated. He starts by drawing the symbols on an OS dragon. A single vertical stroke is 1. A hubble for castle, shaped like an arch, is 10. A coil of rope is 100. A lotus flower is 1. 0th. A bent finger is 10. 0th. A tadpole is 100. Dado and a god with his arms raised, representing infinity or a million, is the largest numeral. The system is straightforward. To write 2, 400 the Tito, you would simply draw 2 lotus flowers, 4 coils of rope, 3 hubbles, and 2 strokes. It's a beautifully visual, additive system. You grasp this part quickly. Counting the sacks of grain in the yard suddenly seems less daunting. You can represent these large numbers. But then comes the hard part, doing anything with them. Addition is simple enough. You just group the symbols and then carry over when you get 10 of any one symbol. 10 strokes become a hubble, 10 hubbles become a rope, and so on. But multiplication and division are a different beast entirely. You don't have multiplication tables memorized like a student centuries in the future. Instead, an NI teaches you the Egyptian method, which relies on doubling. He says you a problem multiply 14 by 7. You can't just know the answer is 98. You have to build it. You create columns. In the first, you start with 1 and keep doubling it. In the second, you start with 14 and double it in parallel. Yoyos, third, soda, dayoyo. You stop the first column when the next number 16 would be larger than 7. Now, you look at the first column and figure out which numbers add up to 7. In this case, it's 1 jar jiasu. So you go to the second column and add up the corresponding numbers. 14加28加56. Use it there, carefully grouping the symbols, carrying the tens, and eventually arrive at 98. It works. It's ingenious, but it's also incredibly slow and cumbersome. A mainstream historical fact is that this system, for all its clumsiness, was sophisticated enough to allow for the massive engineering and architectural calculations needed to build the pyramids and temples. But the real nightmare begins with fractions. This is where you truly start to appreciate the mental gymnastics required of a scribe. The entire Egyptian concept of fractions is based on the unit fraction, that is, fractions with a 1 in the numerator, 1/7, 7/7, etc. They represent these by placing a specific hieroglyph, a shape like an open mouth, above the number, so a mouth over a 5 means 1 mewu. This is fine, until you need to represent a fraction like Tumewu. You cannot write Tumewu. It's conceptually impossible in your system. Instead, you have to express it as a sum of unit fractions. For Tumewu, you would have to write it as 1 meishu from Jisanshi. How do you know this? Because scribes before you have compiled long, complex reference tables, like the famous rhymed mathematical papyrus that will be discovered millennia later. You don't derive it, you look it up. Your job is to memorize these conversions or know where to find them. And then, I gives you a practical granary problem. A work crew of 3 men is to be given 10 loaves of bread. How many does each man get? Your first instinct is to say 3 1/3 loaves. But you can try that. You have to think in Egyptian terms. Each man gets 1 loaf. That's 3 loaves gone. You have 7 left for 3 men. Each gets another loaf. 6 loaves gone. 4 left. Another loaf each. 9 loaves gone. 1 loaf left. This last loaf must be divided among 3 men, so each man gets 1 mason of a loaf. The final answer is 3 sanfantry loaves. Oh wait, and then I point out you made a mistake. The problem was 10 loaves for 3 men, so 10 thirds. In your system, you find the largest unit fraction that fits. That's 3. 3x 3 dunjo. You have 1 remaining to be divided by 3, so 1/3. The answer is 3 1 mason loaves. Oops, my previous calculation was wrong. Let's try another. 7 loaves for 10 men. You can try it 7 measure. You have to break it down. It's 1 mewu and jarashi. Why? Because that's what the table says. Your brain hurts. This complex fractional system is a subject of intense debate among modern Egyptologists. Why did they stick with such a difficult system? Some argue it was deeply tied to their philosophical and religious worldview, a desire to see unity and wholeness, the one in the numerator, as the fundamental building block of all things. Others take a more practical view, suggesting that for their specific needs, dividing rations, calculating land area, figuring out tax rates, this system, once mastered, was functional enough. It avoided the complexities of finding common denominators and was well minus suited to their doubling minus based multiplication. For you, the debate is irrelevant. It's just hard. You spend weeks practicing on Ostraka. In NI dictates endless, tedious problems. If a granary silo is a cylinder with a diameter of 9 cubits and a height of 10 cubits, how many car of grain can it hold? You have to calculate the area of the circular base, which you do by squaring 8 meter of the diameter, a surprisingly close approximation of pi, about 3.6, and then multiply by the height. And every step of the multiplication and division involves the doubling method and the nightmare of unit fractions. One day, you make a mistake in calculating the grain tax owed by a small village. Your numbers are off by a few sacks. In end, he doesn't yell. He does something worse. He takes your Oastrakan, looks at your messy calculations, and then looks at you with an expression of profound disappointment. A scribe's mistake on a shard costs him his pride, he says, his voice dangerously quiet. A scribe's mistake on a papier costs farmers their food and the pharaoh his wealth. Do you understand the difference? You nod, your face burning with shame. This isn't an academic exercise. The numbers you are learning to manipulate represent real things: bread, beer, lies, and the economic foundation of the entire kingdom. Your headache over fractions could literally translate to a family's hunger. You erase the shard with a damp cloth and begin again, your focus sharpened by the cold weight of that responsibility. The path to becoming a scribe is paved not with elegant symbols, but with the brutal, unforgiving stones of mathematics. After you demonstrate a tolerable, if clumsy, grasp of mathematics, NI decides it's time for you to learn about security, not the kind with guards and spears, but a quieter, more pervasive form of control. He introduces you to the subtle, powerful magic of the seal. He takes you out of the stuffy office and into the main courtyard, to one of the smaller, rectangular warehouses. The wooden door is shut fast, but it's not just closed, it's sealed. A thick rope has been wrapped around the door handles and a wooden peg set into the wall, and covering the knot of the rope is a lump of dried Nile mud, a clay ceiling. It's about the size of your palm, and pressed deep into its surface is an intricate pattern. This, NI says, pointing to the mud, is more powerful than any lock. He explains that when a granary, a room, or even a simple storage jar is closed, a blob of wet mud is plastered over the fastening. Then, an official, someone like him, takes his personal seal and presses it into the mud. The seal, often carved from stone, or fastened on a ring or a necklace, is unique to the individual or their office. It might bear their name in hieroglyphs, the name of their institution, like the Treasury of Ammon, or a complex geometric pattern. When the mud dries, the impression is locked in place. The security of this system isn't based on physical strength. A thief could easily smash the mud seal and break the rope, but that would be a foolish crime. The purpose of the seal is not to prevent entry, but to prove that entry has occurred. A broken seal is an instant, undeniable alarm bell. It's a silent witness that screams tampering. When an official returns to a storeroom and finds the seal broken, an investigation begins immediately. Every person who had access to the area is questioned. The consequences for being caught are severe. This is a core principle of Egyptian bureaucracy, a mainstream historical fact supported by thousands of surviving seal impressions found in tombs, palaces, and administrative buildings. It was a system built on accountability, not just physical barriers. NI shows you his own seal. It's a small stone scarab beetle, its underside intricately carved with his name and title. The scarab, or geba, is a powerful symbol of rebirth and creation, a popular choice for amulets and seals. He lets you hold it. It's cool and smooth in your hand, a small object, that radiates immense authority. It is his signature, his presence, even when he is not there. Your task for the day is to learn the practical application. In NI supervises as a team of workers opens a different storeroom. They carefully check the existing seal. It's intact. In NI makes a note on his papers. Then, the workers break it, the dry mud crumbling away. They open the door and begin removing sacks of emmer wheat destined for a local bakery that supplies the temple. Your job is to count the sacks as they come out. You use your new mathematical skills, making neat tally marks on an OS tracker. After the required number of sacks had been removed, the door is closed again. A worker brings a small bucket of wet, sticky Nile mud. He slaps a generous amount over the new rope fastening. Then I looks at you. You do it. He hands you not his personal seal. Of course, that would be an unthinkable breach of protocol, but a simple wooden seal used for internal, low-level closures. It's carved with a basic symbol for the granary itself. Your hand is unsteady as you take it. This is your first act of official power, however small and delegated. You press the seal firmly into the wet mud, making sure to get a clear, deep impression. You pull it away. There, in the dark clay, is the symbol. It's not perfect, a little lopsided, but it's there. You have officially secured a room in the Pharaoh's granary. It's a terrifying and exhilarating feeling. A strange and fascinating detail about this system is the sheer variety and complexity of the seals. Archaeologists have found seals that are not just simple stamps, but cylinder seals, a technology borrowed from Mesopotamia that could be rolled across a larger area of clay to create a continuous, repeating pattern. This was often used for sealing large doorways or entire sections of a tomb. They've also found that high-ranking officials would sometimes change their seals upon promotion, making the old seal obsolete. These discarded seals provide invaluable chronological markers for historians trying to date different layers of an archaeological site. The use of seals also hints at a deeper, almost magical belief. Sealing something wasn't just a bureaucratic act. It was an act of magical protection. In funerary contexts, seals were used to protect the deceased from malevolent spirits and to preserve the tomb's contents for the afterlife. The act of sealing invoked a sense of order and completeness, a shutting out the chaos of the outside world. As you stand back and look at your handiwork, the lopsided seal on the storeroom door, you start to understand the mindset of this place. It's a world built on interlocking layers of trust and verification. The farmer's word is verified by the overseer. The overseer's count is verified by the scribe. The scribe's inventory is secured by the seal. The seal's integrity is verified by the next official to arrive. It is a chain of accountability. Historians still debate the effectiveness of this system in preventing theft. While a broken seal was a clear sign of a crime, what about collusion? What if two officials conspired to enter a room, take something, and then reseal it with one of their own seals, simply adjusting the written records to match? Surviving court documents show that this did happen. The system was not foolproof, and it relied heavily on the idea that most people within the bureaucracy were either honest or too afraid of the consequences to cheat. The complexity of the bureaucracy itself, with its multiple layers of oversight and cross-checking, was perhaps the greatest defense against widespread fraud. NI gives a slight nod of approval at your word. A clear mark, he says. Now, if that mark is broken when we return tomorrow, the guards will want to know who's in this courtyard today, and your name will be on that list. He's not threatening you, he's teaching you. In this world, every action leaves a trace, either in ink on papers or as an impression in clay. Your journey to becoming a scribe is also a journey into becoming a part of that vast, intricate web of responsibility. The day finally arrives. It doesn't come with any fanfare or ceremony. It starts like any other. You've been within NI for what feels like a lifetime, though it's probably been just over a year. You've mastered the art of ink minus making. Your practice script on ostraca is becoming less clumsy, and you can perform basic granary mathematics without breaking into a cold sweat. You have become a useful, predictable part of the office scenery. This morning, a long train of donkeys arrives, from a series of villages to the south. It's a major delivery. Dozens of families, hundreds of sacks of barley. The main courtyard scribe, a senior official named Cohen, is already overwhelmed, his own apprentice scrambling to keep up. Another train is expected from the west before noon. The granary is operating at peak capacity. Inanai is busy with his own measures, reconciling accounts from the temple bakeries. He looks at the growing queue of farmers, then at you, sitting in the corner, practicing your symbols. He seems to be weighing a decision. The risk of you making a mistake versus the risk of a bottleneck in the courtyard that could delay everything. The bottleneck wins. You, he says, not using your name. Take a pallet, a brush, and a new papers. Go to the east gate. Record the barley deliveries from the western villages. You stare at him, your heart suddenly hammering against your ribs. I knew papers, not an OS dragon. This is it. This is real. This is your first official assignment. You are filled with a mix of pure terror and electric excitement. Your hands tremble as you collect your tools. You select a fresh reed and nervously chew the tip into what you hope is a serviceable point. You take a clean, new sheet of papers from the storage chest. It feels impossibly smooth and valuable in your hands. Wasting this would be a disaster. You walk out into the brilliant morning sun, squinting as your eyes adjust. You find a relatively quiet spot near the designated east gate, a place where the farmers are being directed to line up. You arrange your scribe's kit, just as you've seen an N, I and Q, an I and Q and Aman do 1,000 times. You sit cross-legged, lay the papers across your lap, and try to project an aura of calm authority you absolutely do not feel. The first farmer approaches. H.E.S., an old man, his skin weathered like the land he works, his eyes narrowed with a lifetime of suspicion towards officials. He looks at you, a boy playing at being a scribe, and his expression is not one of reverence. It's one of deep skepticism. This is a crucial test. You are no longer just a farmer's son. You are now the face of the state, the very system you once stood opposite. An overseer, the man you don't know, barks out the details from the village of Per-Happy. Farmer, 1 mares, 10 sacks, barley. Your hand is slick with sweat as you dip your brush in the ink. You touch the tip to the papers. The blank sheet seems to mock you. You take a breath. You remember the format in N I taught you. Date first. You use the red ink for the heading. Regane Al year 15. 3rd month of Shimu. Day 22. You make the symbols for the village. Then the farmer's name. Then the commodity barley. Then the number. A single cattle hobble for 10. Your script is shaky. It's not the elegant, confident hand of a master scribe. It's the careful, deliberate drawing of a student. But it's legible. You've done it. You've made the first entry. The next farmer steps up, and the next. You fall into a rhythm. Listen, dip, right. Listen, dip, right. You start using standard abbreviations you've learned just by observation, a form of scribal shorthand that makes the process faster. This is a mainstream historical practice seen in many administrative documents. Scribes didn't always write out full words when a well-known abbreviation would do, saving time and precious paper space. But then, a problem. A farmer insists he has brought 12 sacks. The overseer's tally says 11. They begin to argue, their voices rising in the heat. Everyone in the queue stops to watch. This is your first real challenge. Who do you believe? What do you write down? Inanai is nowhere in sight. You are the authority here. You remember something Inanai once muttered while complaining about a similar discrepancy. Always trust the count on minus sight. You stand up, trying to make your voice sound deeper, more commanding than it is. Unload the donkey. We will count them again. Here. The farmer and the overseer look at you, surprised by your intervention. But the procedure is correct. The sacks are laid out on the dusty ground. You count them yourself. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 11. The farmer grumbles, swearing he loaded 12, blaming a thief on the road. But the physical evidence is right here. You look him in the eye and say, the count is 11. You turn back to your papers and, with a now slightly steadier hand, You write the symbol for 11. The crisis is over. You have asserted your authority, and it has been, however grudgingly, accepted. A strange but important detail of your job is the very act of writing. You, like all scribes, are writing in hieratic, not the formal, beautiful hieroglyphs you see carved on temple walls. Hieratic is the cursive, everyday script of bureaucracy and literature. It's faster to write, with simpler, more rounded forms. A common misconception is that all Egyptians wrote in the picturesque hieroglyphs. In reality, that was a specialized, formal script, akin to using an ornate calligraphy font today. Hieratic was the workhorse of the Egyptian state, and it's the script you are now using to make history. Historians today still analyze documents like the one you are creating, debating their meaning. Is a list like this a simple inventory, or is it a tax record? The line between the two is blurry. The grain coming into the granary is both the nation's food supply and its primary form of revenue. The academic debate about whether to classify these as administrative texts or economic texts is ongoing. But for you, it's just today's work. You are simply recording what is in front of you, creating the raw data that I and others will later use to manage the kingdom's wealth. As the sun reaches its peak, the queue of donkeys from the west finally dwindles. You have filled half a sheet of papers with neat, if slightly wobbly, columns of text. You check your totals. You use the doubling method to multiply the number of families by their average delivery, just to see if your total number of sacks feels right. It does. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. You take your precious document back to the office. Inanna is there. You hand him the papers without a word. He unrolls it and scans your work. His face is impassive. He examines the entries, your handwriting, your resolution of the dispute, which he undoubtedly heard about. He spends a long time looking at it, and your stomach churns with anxiety. Finally, he looks up at you. The loops on your P's are too wide. He says, "You are wasting space. Do it better next time." And with that, he rolls up the papers and places it with his other official documents. It's the highest form of praise he is capable of giving. Your work was not just acceptable, it was accepted. It has now officially become part of the Granaries records. Your name isn't on it, but your hand is. You have, for the first time, turned the labor of the fields into a permanent, official fact. Now that you are no longer just an observer, the inner workings of the granary complex begin to reveal themselves to you not as a chaotic swarm of activity, but as a finely tuned, hierarchical machine. Your first official task was a success, and I starts giving you more responsibilities, mostly tedious cross-minus checking of lists and counting of secondary supplies like sacks and rope. This new work forces you to interact with different people, and you start to piece together the invisible pyramid of power that governs this city of grain. At the absolute bottom are the porters. These are the men you see endlessly hauling the heavy sacks of grain from the weighing area to the mouths of the silos. They are a rough, powerful group, their bodies hardened by the relentless labor. Many are seasonal workers, farmers from nearby villages earning a bit of extra ration, while others are permanent state employees. They communicate in grunts and short, sharp commands. You learn to stay out of their way. Theirs is a world of pure physical effort, and they have little time or respect for the delicate work of a scribe minus in minus training. Just above them are the donkey minus drivers and animal handlers. Their status is slightly higher because they are responsible for valuable state assets, the donkeys. As you learn it on your first trip here, these animals are the lifeblood of the transport network. Their handlers are skilled, knowing how to calm a stubborn animal or spot the first signs of sickness. They operate in their own world, a sub-minus culture of the granary focused on fodder, harnesses, and the well-minus being of their beasts. Then there are the specialized workers. You meet the men who are responsible for maintaining the granary structures themselves. They are plasters who constantly patch the mud-minus brick walls of the silos to keep them weatherproof and pest-minus proof. You see them high up on wooden scaffolding, shouting down to their assistants below. There's a quiet professionalism to them. They know that a single, unnoticed crack can let in moisture or insects that could spoil a mountain of grain. Above these laborers are the guardians, the guards of the complex. They are a distinct presence, identifiable by the simple spears or heavy wooden staves they carry. They don't haul grain or count sacks. They stand, they watch, they patrol. They are the physical enforcement of the rules you are learning to record. They report to a chief of guards, a man who answers directly to the Granaries governor. Their job is to deter theft, break up fights, and maintain a general sense of order. You learn their faces and give them a respectful nod. You do not want to be on their bad side. And then there is your world, the scribal class. But even here, you discover a hierarchy as rigid as any other. You are at the very bottom, an apprentice. Above you is an NI, a junior scribe. He handles the day minus to minus day records, but has little real authority. He, in turn, reports to a more senior scribe like Q.N. Amon, the man you saw in the main courtyard on your first day. Q.N. Amon oversees a whole section of the Granaries operations, and several junior scribes report to him. His signature carries more weight. His reports are the ones that go to the top. The existence of this detailed hierarchy is a mainstream historical fact, reconstructed from titles found in official documents and on funerary stelae. We know of titles like Scribe of the Granary, Controller of the Granary, and at the very top, Overseer of the Granaries of Upper and Lower Egypt, a major state official who answered directly to the Vizier or even the Pharaoh. And at the apex of your local pyramid is the governor of the granary himself. His name is Anibiaman. You have only seen him a few times, a distant, imposing figure inspecting the facility, surrounded by a retinue of assistants. He is a high-ranking noble, a man of immense power. He doesn't deal in numbers of sacks, but in regional yields, in shipping schedules to the capital, in reports to the royal court. The papers you so carefully filled out becomes a single line item in a much larger report that Q.N. Amon prepares for any Amon. The vast, physical reality of the grain is distilled, layer by layer, into pure information as it moves up the pyramid. A fascinating, and somewhat odd, detail you learn is about the specialization within the scribal corps. Not all scribes are just scribes. You hear of a scribe of the offering miner stable, who deals only with grain destined for the gods, and a scribe of the army, who manages rations for the military. There's even a scribe of the cadastry, who works with land surveys to predict the next harvest yield. The bureaucracy is a fractal, with its complex structure replicated in miniature across every department of the state. Historians still debate whether these were permanent, full-time titles, or if they were roles a scribe might take on for a specific period. Was the scribe of the army a permanent military bureaucrat, or was he a regular granary scribe temporarily assigned to a military campaign? The answer is likely both, depending on the era and the specific needs of the state. This complex system, you realize, is designed for one purpose: to diffuse responsibility while maintaining strict accountability. If a mistake is found in a final report, the governor and Amon will demand an explanation from the senior scribe Q.N. Amon. Q.N. Amon will then trace the error back through the records to the junior scribe who made the initial entry, someone like an NI. And in NI, you know with dreadful certainty, will point his finger directly at you. It is a waterfall of blame, and you are standing at the bottom. This understanding changes how you are. You are no longer just trying to please an NI. You are trying to create a record that is flawless. A small, perfect break in the great pyramid of administration. You double-check your own tallies. When you copy a list from an OS Draken to a fresh papers, you read it back to yourself, making sure not a single symbol is out of place. You are learning the most important lesson of a bureaucrat: your work is your shield. As long as your numbers are correct and your records are clear, you are safe. The system protects those who serve it faithfully. It is a slow, patient, and deeply impersonal machine, and you are finally beginning to understand your place as one of its many small, but essential, cogs. Your work as a scribe isn't just about people and numbers. You quickly learn that the granary has a vast, silent, and ever-hungry population of its own, the pests. The battle against spoilage and theft by non-human actors is constant. a secret war waged within the cool darkness of the silos. One afternoon, in N I send you with another scribe to unseal a smaller, secondary silo that hasn't been opened in several months. It contains a reserve of seed grain for the next planting season. The seal is intact, the plaster undisturbed, but when the workers heave open the heavy stone lid at bottom to draw out a sample, the first scoop of barley tells a grim story. It's warm. The grain itself is riddled with tiny holes, and a fine, greyish powder coats everything. A faint, musty smell hangs in the air. The other scribe curses under his breath. He sifts the grain through his fingers and shows you what HES found tiny. Dark minus brown insects, weevils, specifically the granary weevil, an insidious pest that will become the bane of stored grain for the next several thousand years of human history. This is a problem that goes far beyond a simple counting error. The female weevil lays her eggs inside the grain kernel. The larva hatches, eats the kernel from the inside out, pubertas, and then emerges as an adult, ready to repeat the cycle. An infestation, once started, and spread with terrifying speed, reducing a silo full of valuable food to a worthless mass of hollowed minus out husks and insect waste. This constant threat is a mainstream historical reality for any society dependent on stored agriculture. The Egyptians, for all their architectural and administrative genius, were locked in a never-mind-ascending arms race with the insect world. In N.I. is summoned. He inspects the spoiled grain, his face grim. This is a significant loss. He immediately dictates a report, and you see the bureaucracy shift into a different gear. This is no longer about intake and output. It's about damage control. A team of workers is assigned the miserable task of emptying the silo, separating what little can be salvaged. The spoiled grain will be burned to prevent the infestation from spreading. It's a stark lesson the wealth of the nation, so carefully counted and recorded, can simply vanish into thin air, eaten from the inside out by creatures smaller than your fingernail. But insects are not the only thieves. Rodents are a constant menace. My son dreads, drawn by the scent of food, are masters of infiltration. They can squeeze through the smallest cracks in the mud minus brick, climb ropes, and chew through sacks. You see evidence of their presence everywhere: nod bags, small black droppings, and the occasional flash of a furry body disappearing into the shadows. To combat this larger foe, the Egyptians have enlisted a secret weapon, the silent, graceful, and utterly lethal partner, the cat. You see them all over the granary complex. They are not pets in the modern sense. They are not cuddled or given names by the officials. They are semi-minus feral, self-minus sufficient working animals. A living, breathing pest control system. You see them lounging in patches of sun, their sleek bodies the picture of laziness. But, at dusk and dawn, they are transformed into deadly hunters, stalking the shadows of the warehouses. They are valued for their skill, and killing a cat, even accidentally, is a serious crime, a fact noted with fascination by later Greek historians like Herodotus. This special relationship with cats is one of the most famous aspects of ancient Egyptian culture. While they were beloved as pets in some households, their primary, practical role in places like this was as guardians of the food supply. Their presence was a form of biological warfare, and a very effective one at that. A quirky, and perhaps apocryphal, story you hear whispered among the workers is that the state salary for these granary cats was their pick of the mice they cottoned the occasional bowl of watered minus-down beer, which they were said to enjoy. Historians still debate the precise timeline of feline domestication, and Egypt's role in it is central to the discussion. Did the Egyptians actively domesticate the wild cats of the region, or did the cats domesticate themselves? The current thinking leans towards the latter. The vast, concentrated food source of the granaries attracted rodents, which in turn attracted wildcats. The humans, seeing the benefit of having these efficient predators around, simply tolerated and encouraged their presence. It was a symbiotic relationship that developed over centuries, a perfect example of co-minus evolution. The cats got a reliable food source, the mice, not the grain, and the humans got free, Self minus replicating pest control. Beyond weevils and mice, there is the ever minus present threat of mold and fungus, especially if any moisture gets into the silos. This is why the plasters are so essential, and why the silos are designed to be as airtight as possible. Some silo designs even included a small, raised floor to allow for air circulation underneath, a clever bit of ancient engineering to combat that. Watching the workers dispose of the spoiled grain, you realize that the scribe's role is not just to record the good, but also to meticulously document the bad. The loss from this silo must be accounted for. It will be recorded in a separate ledger, under a heading like spoilage or loss. These numbers are just as important as the intake numbers. They are used to calculate the real, usable surplus of the state. A granary that is 90% full on paper might only be 70% full in reality. Once these inevitable losses are factored in, the ability to accurately estimate and track this spoilage was a sign of a competent administration. You look at a sleek ginger cat watching the proceedings from the top of a wall, its tail twitching. It seems to be the only one in the entire complex who is truly its own master. It is part of the system but not beholden to it. It does its vital work for its own reasons. An independent contractor in the war for food security. In a world of rigid hierarchies and written rules, the cat is a reminder of a wilder, more ancient power, one that the mighty Egyptian state was smart enough not to fight, not to recruit. After the sobering lesson of the weevil infestation, NI decides you need to understand the very foundation of all granary accounting, the act of measurement itself. It's not enough to count sacks, because sacks can vary in size. To have a truly standardized system, you need a standardized unit. In ancient Egypt, that unit is the hecat. NI takes you to a special, secured room. Inside, kept on a clean linen cloth, are the official measuring tools of the granary. They are not crude scoops. They are beautifully crafted wooden boxes, some decorated with carvings or inlaid with ivory. These are the master hecat measures. A hecat is a specific volume of grain, equivalent to about 4.8 liters in modern terms. This is the bedrock of the entire economic system. Rations, taxes, and trade are all calculated in hecats. He shows you how it's done. A worker brings a sack of barley. Another official, whose sole job is to be the master of the measure, carefully pours the grain from the sack into the master hecat box. He uses a flat stick, a strickler, to level the top perfectly, scraping off any excess. The grain that falls away is not considered part of the measure. The box is then emptied, and the process is repeated. It's slow, deliberate, and precise. This is the moment of truth, where a farmer's lumpy, inconsistent sack is converted into an exact, official quantity. Your job is to stand beside the master of the measure and record his count. He calls out each hecat as he completes it. 1, 2, 3. You make a stroke for each. After 10 strokes, you convert it to a Hubble symbol. You are the second set of eyes, the official witness to the measurement. It's a classic bureaucratic technique, the 2- person rule, ensuring no single person can falsify the count at this crucial stage. This official standardization of weights and measures is a key pillar of any complex state, and it's a mainstream historical fact that the Egyptians were masters of it. Their system extended beyond volume. They had standardized units for length, the cubit, based on the length of the forearm from elbow to fingertips, weight the deben, and area the setat. This allowed the state to survey land, calculate building materials, and levy taxes with a high degree of consistency across the entire kingdom. But then, you learn about the gray area, after the official measurement, as the workers put the measured grain into the silo. A small amount inevitably spills on the ground. A few kernels here, a handful there. What happens to this grain? An old, grizzled porter, seeing your curious look, mutters to you, "That's the scribe's share." He explains that there is an unofficial, but universally understood, perk of the job. The spillage, or shayet, is traditionally swept up at the end of the day by the junior scribes and officials. It's not considered theft. It's a customary bonus, a way of supplementing the modest official rations. It's a system ripe for abuse. How much is accidental spillage? And how much is a worker accidentally tipping the scoop a little too far? It's a subtle no. This practice of institutionalized skimming is something historians and archaeologists have pieced together from hints in official texts and discovery of out minus of minus of minus place grain caches. It's a fascinating, if slightly shady, aspect of the system. There was the official, state minus sanctioned economy recorded on papiers, and then there was this parallel, informal economy that operated in the dust of the threshing floor and the measuring station. Historians still debate how formalized this was. Was it a universally accepted custom? Or was it a form of low minus level corruption that was simply tolerated because it was too difficult to stamp out? The evidence is ambiguous, suggesting it was likely a bit of both. A custom that could easily slide into outright theft if not kept in check by vigilant senior officials. You watch as the master of the measure works. He is meticulous, but the workers handing the sacks, they are a little less so. A sack is dropped a little too hard and a small trickle of grain escapes. A scoop is emptied a little too quickly. No one says a word. It just happens, and you realize that your official ration of bread and beer might soon be supplemented by a small bag of swept barley. It makes you slightly uncomfortable, but it also makes you feel, for the first time, like a true insider. You also learn about another layer of complexity. The HECAT isn't just one HECAT. There was the standard HECAT, but for certain calculations involving different types of grain or bread, scribes used a larger conceptual unit, the quadruple HECAT. Furthermore, there were regional variations in measures that the state was constantly trying to suppress and standardize. A papiers from one town might refer to a local sack measure that had to be converted into official HECATs for the central records. Your job as a scribe isn't just to record numbers, but to be a human calculator, constantly converting between different units and standards. In NI tasks you with a new kind of calculation. A baker needs 100 HECATs of MRE, but the only silo available for withdrawal is one containing barley. Hammer and barley have different densities and different values. In NI gives you a conversion ratio from a reference table. A certain number of HECATs of barley is considered equivalent in value to 1 HECAT of emmer. You have to do the math, using your clumsy fractions, to figure out the correct amount of barley to release. It's a headache. Your calculations involve finding to make sense of one mewu of a number, and you spend a long time working it out on your OS Dragon. But when you finally get the answer, you understand something profound. The granary isn't just storing grain, it's managing value. The physical kernels are just representatives of a more abstract concept of wealth. And the HECAT, the scribes' tables, and your painful fractional math are the tools that allow this wealth to be fluid, to be converted and exchanged. You are not just a bean minus counter. You are learning the very grammar of the Egyptian economy. The little wooden box is the start, but the real work happens in the intricate calculations on your shard of pottery. You are beginning to feel a sense of confidence in your work. Your handwriting is neater, your calculations are faster, and you understand the flow of the granary. It is then that in N, I gives you a task that connects your abstract world of numbers directly to the lives of hundreds of other people. You are going to help prepare the payroll. In ancient Egypt, there is no money in the form of coins. The concept hasn't been invented yet. The economy runs on a sophisticated system of barter and rations. Wealth is measured in goods, and the primary form of payment for state workers is grain. Your meticulous records of HECATs are not just inventory. They are the national bank account from which all salaries are drawn. A massive construction project is underway nearby, the expansion of the local temple dedicated to Sobek, the crocodile god. This project employs hundreds of laborers, stonemasons, carpenters, and artists. They are all employees of the state, or, more accurately, the temple, which is an arm of the state, and they are paid for their labor in bread and beer. But the bread and beer are manufactured from the very grain stored in your granary. A senior scribe from the temple project arrives with a papyrus scroll. It's an official request, a wage bill. It lists the number of workers, their grades, and their corresponding pay rates. You watch as N, I, and Q and Amon review the list. A basic laborer might receive a ration of 10 loaves of bread and a measure of beer per day. A skilled craftsman, like a sculptor, might receive 20 loaves and 2 measures of beer. An overseer or a junior scribe on the project would receive even more. This differentiated pay scale is a well-documented historical fact, showing a clear evaluation of different types of labor long before the invention of currency. Your job is to do the math. In NI gives you a section of the list the Carpenters Guild. There are 45 carpenters, each entitled to 15 loaves of bread and 1.5 measures of beer per 10 minus day work week. You have to calculate the total amount of grain needed to produce that much bread and beer. This is where it gets complicated. You have to use another one of the scribe's secret weapons, the PE-SU table. The PE-SU is a measure of efficiency or quality, specifically for bread and beer. It tells you how many loaves of a certain size, or jugs of a certain strength of beer, can be made from 1 hecat of grain. A PE-SU of 10 for bread means 10 loaves from 1 hecat. A lower PE-SU means denser, better minus quality bread. Your task is to take the wage bill in loaves and, using the standard PE-SU for state rations, convert it back into a raw quantity of barley and demo wheat. You hunch over your OS dragon, your mind swimming in multiplication and division. 45 men times 15 loaves. That's 675 loaves. The standard ration loaf has a PE-SU of 5. So you divide 675 by 5 to get the number of hecats needed. 135 hecats of emmer wheat, just for the carpenters, bread for 1 week. Then you do the same for the beer, which uses barley. The calculations are slow and painstaking. A single mistake could mean 100 men go hungry or the state is defrauded of its resources. Here you stumble upon a fascinating and slightly bizarre little detail of the Egyptian economy. Beer was not just a drink. It was considered a type of liquid bread, a fundamental food source. It was thick, nutritious, and only mildly alcoholic. More like a thin porridge than modern beer. It was a vital source of calories and nutrients for the workforce. The workers who built the Great Pyramids of Giza were paid in enormous quantities of bread and beer. You are calculating the fuel for the human engines of the state. Once all the scribes have completed their calculations, the numbers are cross-minus checked and compiled into a master withdrawal order. This document, signed by Q.N. Haman and authorized by the Granary Governor N.E.B. Haman, is the key. It allows the temple agents to withdraw thousands of hecats of grain. You witness the process. The temple representatives arrive with their own donkeys and sacks. The silo is unsealed. The grain is measured out with the same painstaking precision as when it arrived, and your carefully calculated quantity is handed over. The grain you once recorded coming in from a farmer in the field is now going out to become the salary for a mason carving a crocodile's smile on a temple wall. You are a middleman in the grand redistribution of the nation's wealth. As the last sack of barley is loaded onto the temple donkeys, you look at the columns of figures on your practice shop. They are not just abstract symbols anymore. You can see the bread being baked, the beer being brewed. You can imagine the tired stonemason at the end of a long day, receiving his pay, his daily sustenance, which you helped to calculate. In Anai seems to sense your contemplative mood. Every stone in that temple, he says, gesturing vaguely in the direction of the construction site, is paid for with a kernel of barley. Do not forget that. You understand. The grand monuments, the art, the religion, the entire glittering civilization of Egypt is built on a mountain of grain, and you, a humble apprentice scribe, are one of its guardians and accountants. It is a heavy, but deeply satisfying, responsibility. Life in the granary settles into a predictable, if demanding, rhythm. You have your duties, your calculations, your small but growing sphere of competence. The cycle of deliveries and withdrawals is the heartbeat of your world. Then, one morning, that heartbeat skips. A rumor flies through the complex, carried on whispers from the guards at the main gate to the porters in the yard. A royal inspector is here. This isn't just any official. This is a king's eye, an agent sent directly from the vizier's office in the capital city, perhaps Memphis or Thebes, depending on the dynasty. His job is to conduct unannounced audits of provincial administrations, to root out corruption, and to ensure that the pharaoh's business is being conducted efficiently and honestly. His arrival is the bureaucratic equivalent of a thunderbolt from a clear sky. A palpable tension grips the entire granary. Everyone, from the lowest porter to the senior scribes, suddenly seems busier, more focused. The usual low-level chatter disappears. You see workers sweeping the courtyards with extra vigor. The air crackles with anxiety. You catch your first glimpse of him as he tours the main silos, escorted by a very nervous Midas-looking Governor Neb Amon. The inspector is an older man, his face a mask of stern neutrality. He wears a kilt of the finest, most brilliantly white linen you have ever seen, and he carries a single, elegant papier scroll. He doesn't speak much. He mostly listens. His sharp eyes missing nothing. He points to a silo, asks a quiet question, and then Neb Amon answers, his usual booming confidence replaced by a deferential murmur. The real terror begins when the inspector and his small retinue of junior scribes enter the records office. This is where the paper trail lies or dies. Q and Amon and Denanar stand at attention, their faces pale. The inspector doesn't bother with pleasantries. He unrolls his own scroll. It contains data from the central treasury, the expected tax yields from your province, based on the last land survey. He wants to see if your granaries intake records match the state's projections. This process of auditing and cross-minus referencing was a critical part of the Egyptian state's control mechanism. It's a well-documented historical fact that the central government kept extensive records and sent out officials to ensure the provincial numbers were not being doctored. This prevented local governors from becoming too powerful or cheating the central government of its revenue. The inspector calls for the intake ledgers from the last harvest season. This includes the very first one you ever wrote. Your shaky, clumsy script now a source of deep personal dread. He and his scribes begin the painstaking process of checking the totals. They don't just read the numbers. They redo the math. You can hear the soft whisper of their voices as they double-minus check additions and conversions. The silence in the room is so profound that the scratching of their reed brushes on papiers sounds like thunder. You are tasked with fetching and carrying documents, unrolling scrolls, and finding specific records. Your heart pounds with every request. What if you made a mistake? What if that disputed count of 11 sacks instead of 12 was recorded incorrectly? What if your pea soup calculation for the bakery was wrong? Every small decision you've made over the past year flashes through your mind. A scribe's career can be made or broken by an audit. Here you learn a strange and specific detail about scribal practice. When a scribe made a mistake in a final document, he couldn't just erase it. The papiers was too valuable, and erasing could look like a cover minus up. Instead, the proper procedure was to draw a neat line through the incorrect number and write the correct one just above it, sometimes with a small note in the margin explaining the correction. This created a transparent record of the change. The inspector's scribes are looking for these corrections. Too many of them suggest sloppiness. An absence of them can, paradoxically, also be suspicious, suggesting the records might be too perfect. The inspector then asks for the spoilage reports, the records of loss due to pests and mold. He compares this year's percentage to previous years. Is it unusually high? That could suggest negligence. Is it unusually low? That could suggest that spoiled grain is being issued as rations, or that scribes are covering up losses to make themselves look better. It is a delicate balance. Historians today still analyze these kinds of records, but a fundamental question remains a topic of debate. What was the acceptable level of corruption? Did the state have a realistic understanding that some low-level fraud was inevitable and simply factor it in? Or was the official position one of zero tolerance, with any deviation being a serious crime? The severity of punishments recorded in court documents, including beatings, removal from office, or even forced labor, suggests the official stance was harsh. But the persistence of complaints about corrupt officials across centuries of texts suggests the reality was a constant struggle. after what feels like an eternity. The inspector focuses on the wage bill for the temple project. He asks for your calculations, the OS reckon shard you used to figure out the grain required for the carpenter's bread. In an eye points to you. The inspector's gaze falls upon you for the first time. He beckons you forward. You approach, your knees feeling weak. You hand him your shard of pottery, covered in your messy figures. He examines it, then looks at the final, clean number on the official withdrawal order. He traces the path of your multiplication, your division. He taps the part of your calculation where you converted the loaves back into he-cats of grain. He looks at you. The PE sou of 5 is for common bread. He states, his voice flat. The Carpenters Guild is supplied with a finer loaf. A PE sou of 4. Your calculation is incorrect. You have shorted the temple bakery by 20 minus 7 he-cats of emma. The blood drains from your face. It's over. Your career is over before it truly began. You will be disgraced, sent back to the fields. Inanai looks horrified. The inspector stares at you for a long moment. Then he turns to an EBA-man. Your scribes need better training, he says, but the error is in the temple's favor, not the state's. An honest mistake. Rectify it. And just like that, he moves on to the next document. You are left standing there, shaking, drenched in a cold sweat. You were wrong, but you were wrong in the right direction. You didn't defraud the state. You merely made a mistake at the expense of another department. It was a blunder, not a crime. Inanai gives you a look that is a mixture of fury and profound relief. The audit continues for 2 more days. When the inspector finally leaves, a collected sigh of relief ripples through the granary. That night, you go over your calculations again and again, burning the PE sou tables into your memory. You have survived your first encounter with the system's immune response. You have been tested, found wanting, but ultimately spared, and you have learned the most valuable lesson of all the state's memory, written on papers, is long, and its size can appear anywhere, at any time. The inspector's visit, as terrifying as it was, leaves behind a new clarity. It forces you to see the granary not just as a food depot or a payroll office, but as the heart of the state's financial system. The grain you count isn't just sustenance, it's currency, and the act of a farmer delivering his harvest is not just a deposit, it is the primary act of taxation. You begin to handle the records with this new understanding. When you log a delivery of 50 he-cats of barley from a farmer named IPY, you realize you are not just recording an addition to the stockpile. You are recording IPY's payment of his annual taxes. His grain is his contribution to the functioning of the entire kingdom. It will pay for the soldiers who guard the borders, the diplomats who travel to foreign lands, and the priests who maintain the temples. This concept of taxation in kind is a fundamental, mainstream historical feature of the ancient Egyptian economy. Without coinage, the state's revenue was collected in the form of goods and labor. Grain was the most important of these goods because it was storable, transportable, and divisible. A portion of every farmer's harvest belonged to the state. This wasn't seen as an unfair burden, but as part of the natural order. Maya, the pharaoh, as the living god, owned all the land of Egypt. The farmers were simply his tenants, paying their rent to the divine landlord. In exchange, the pharaoh's administration provided stability, security, and, most importantly, the management of the Nile's life minus giving water through irrigation projects. It was a grand social contract, and you are one of its bookkeepers. Inanai now trusts you enough to let you assist with the tax assessments themselves. This happens long before the harvest. You accompany a senior scribe to the fields, not as a farmer, but as an official. Your job is to help measure the plots of land. You use a long rope, knotted at regular intervals of 1 cubit, as a measuring tape. You and another apprentice pull the rope taut across the field while the senior scribe records the dimensions. From these dimensions, you calculate the area of the plot in set S. Then, based on the height of the Nile's inundation that year, a crucial piece of data recorded by official millimeters up and down the river, the scribe consults a table. A high flood means more fertile land and a higher expected yield. thus a higher tax. A low flood means a lower tax. It is a surprisingly sophisticated and flexible system, designed to adapt to the realities of the agricultural year. Here you encounter a weird and wonderful aspect of the land registry. The fields aren't just identified by numbers on a map. They have names. You'll be measuring the field of the sycamore tree, or IPY's northern plot, or the land that floods first. These names are passed down through generations and are recorded in the official cadastry, the state's master register of land holdings. This gives the bureaucracy a strangely personal, anecdotal flavor. The records are a blend of precise geometry and local folklore. Once the expected yield is calculated, the tax is set as a specific number of hecats per set out. This is the number that the granary will expect to receive from that plot after the harvest. When Farmer IP later arrives with his donkeys, you will pull out the assessment record and check his delivery against the amount owed. But this is where it gets complicated, and where a great deal of historical debate lies. What if IPY's field was struck by a plague of locusts? What if his patch of barley was trampled by a stray hippopotamus from the river? The official assessment doesn't account for such personal disasters. The surviving documents show a system that appears rigid on paper, but how was it applied in practice? You witness the answer firsthand. An old farmer comes before Q&A-man, the senior scribe, wringing his hands. His tax assessment was for 60 hecats, but he has only brought 40. He launches into a long, sad story about a localized pest infestation that wiped out a third of his crop. He has witnesses from his village to back him up. This is a critical moment. If Q&A-man is too lenient, everyone will show up with a sad story, and the state's revenues will collapse. If he is too harsh, he risks driving a productive farmer into ruin, making him unable to plant for the next season. Q&A-man listens patiently. He asks short, probing questions. He sends an assistant to speak with the village overseer. In the end, he makes a decision. He accepts the 40 hecats, but makes a special note in the margin of the ledger deficit of 20 hecats due to reported pestilence, to be evaluated next season. The farmer is granted a temporary reprieve, not a full pardon. He will be expected to make up for the shortfall in future, more prosperous years. This discretionary power of the scribe is immense. The historical debate centers on how often this mercy was shown. Was it a regular feature of the system, a kind of informal insurance scheme, or was it a rare exception, granted only to the most convincing or well-connected farmers? The official court documents are full of cases of people being punished for failing to pay their taxes, but texts like the eloquent peasant show a cultural ideal of justice and consideration for the common man. The truth was likely dependent on the personality of the individual scribe or governor. You realize that your job requires more than just math. It requires judgment. It requires the ability to read people, to distinguish a genuine hardship from a clever excuse. The papiers records the numbers, but the real work often happens in the unwritten space between the lines, in the negotiation and mediation between the rigid demands of the state and the fragile realities of human life. The granary is not just a building. It's a courthouse, an assessor's office, and a bank, all rolled into one. And the ink in your palette is the medium that balances the books of an entire civilization. You've learned that the grain pays for salaries and that it constitutes the state's tax revenue. Now, you begin to grasp its third, and perhaps most inspiring function as the fuel for monumental, eternal projects. The grain in your silo is the invisible foundation of the pyramids, temples, and tombs that define the very landscape of Egypt. While you live in a later period, the legacy of the great pyramid-minus builders of the Old Kingdom is all around you. Their stories are legends, and their methods are a subject of study and reverence. In a rare moment of expansive mood, explains it to you. How do you think they built the great pyramids at Giza? He asks. With magic? No, with barley. The sheer scale of the logistics is staggering. You do a quick, hypothetical calculation on your lowest reckon. If 20 Dara workers each receive a daily ration equivalent to, say, 7 of a hecat of grain in the form of bread and beer, that's over 6 600 hecats of grain per day in a 10-day week. That's 66 thorough hecats. The numbers become so large they are almost meaningless. This required a national effort of food production, collection, storage, and distribution on a scale never before seen in human history. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is not just a triumph of engineering. It is a triumph of bureaucratic organization and surplus management. The granary system was the engine that made it possible. Your own granary plays a role in a similar, if smaller, project, the ongoing construction at the Temple of Sobi. You see it every time you issue grain to the temple bakery. But one day, a new kind of order comes down. It's not for grain for bread, but a massive withdrawal of barley and dimmer for a special project. The order is authorized by the vizier himself. A few days later, you see the result. A huge barge, one of the biggest you've ever seen, is being loaded at the river port. It's not being loaded with grain. It's being loaded with a single, colossal block of red granite, quarried far to the south in Aswan. The block is destined for the capital, to be part of a new obelisk for the pharaoh. The grain you released, it was the payment, not for the stone itself which already belongs to the pharaoh, but for the incredible amount of labor required to quarry it, transport it to the river, and load it onto the barge. The grain was also the ration for the hundreds of men, who will now have the back-breaking task of rowing and poling that barge against the current all the way to the capital. You are witnessing the conversion of food energy into work energy on a massive scale. The surplus calories produced by farmers in your province are being transformed into the kinetic energy required to move a mountain of stone. A weird little minus known fact about these projects is the level of detailed accounting involved. Archaeologists have found ostraca from workers' villages like Direl minus Mundane, the village of the artisans who built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings that are, essentially, attendance sheets. They record not just who was present for work, but why they were absent. Sick, brewing beer, or even mummifying his relative are listed as legitimate reasons for missing a day's work. This shows an administration that was not just concerned with macro-logistics, but with the day-to-day management of its human resources. You start to see the connections everywhere. The fine linen kilt worn by the inspector was woven by women who were paid in grain. The chisels used by the stonemasons were made of copper, which was mined by men in the remote Sinai desert, who were supplied with food and water by donkey trains, all provisioned by the granary system. Then to yours. The papers you write on every single object and activity of the state is woven into this vast web of grain-based economics. But this grand system also sparks a historical debate that continues to this day. What was the true cost? Did these monumental projects, particularly the pyramids of the Old Kingdom, tax the resources of the state? Some historians argue that the immense concentration of resources and manpower on funerary monuments may have weakened the economy, contributing to the eventual collapse of the Old Kingdom into the First Intermediate Period. They suggest the state was essentially bankrupting itself to build tombs for dead kings. Other historians disagree, arguing that these projects were actually economic stimulants. They centralized and trained a massive, skilled workforce, spurred innovation in logistics and administration, and reinforced the central authority of the king, which in turn guaranteed the stability necessary for agricultural prosperity. In this view, the pyramid was not a drain on the economy, but its central organizing principle. As you watch the granite-laden barge slowly begin its journey north, you can see the logic in both arguments. The power is undeniable, but the cost, in hecats and human effort, is immense. That evening, you look at the rows of silos in the fading light. They are not just passive storehouses. They are batteries, charged with the energy of the sun and the Nile, captured by the labor of farmers, then the scribes, the accountants, the managers. You are the ones who get to decide where that energy is directed. Whether to feed a worker building a tomb, a soldier guarding a fort, or a family during a famine. It is a power far greater than you ever imagined when you were a boy sweating in the fields. The grain is not just the foundation of the pyramids. It is the foundation of civilization itself. For several years, Your life has been governed by a comfortable, predictable cycle. The Nile floods, the fields are planted, the harvest comes in, the taxes are collected, the granary fills, and then it slowly empties as rations are paid out. It is a rhythm as reliable as the rising sun. But the world is built on mate, a fragile cosmic balance, and this year, the balance dips. It begins with a feeling of wrongness in the air during the season of AKHET, the inundation. The river rises, as it always does, but it lacks conviction. It wells, but it doesn't reach the high minus water marks on the village walls that it has for the past few years. The official reports from the Nilometers downstream confirm the fear the flood is weak. This isn't a catastrophe, not yet, but every official in the granary, from Governor Mundane down to you, understands the implications. A low flood means less land is covered in the life minus giving sill. It means the secondary irrigation canals won't fill. It means the harvest will be smaller, and a smaller harvest means less tax revenue. And, more importantly, less surplus food. This is the terror that has haunted every Egyptian generation, the failure of the Nile. It is the one force of nature that the otherwise all-minus powerful state cannot control. A major failure of the flood is a mainstream historical event that is directly linked to periods of political instability and collapse, most notably the end of the Old Kingdom. A prolonged drought could shatter the divine authority of the pharaoh, who was expected to guarantee the land's prosperity as the growing season progresses. The reports from the field scribes are grim. The yields are down, in some areas by as much as a third. When harvest time comes, the lines of farmers at the granary gate are shorter. Their donkeys carry fewer sacks. The mood is not resentful, as it sometimes is in a good year. It is fearful. They deliver their tax, but they know the small amount they have left in their own storage bins will have to last longer than ever. Inside the granary, the atmosphere has changed. The usual hum of activity is replaced by a tense, calculating quiet. Governor Amon is in constant consultation with the senior scribes. The ledgers are reviewed, not for mistakes, but for potential. Where is every single hecat of grain stored? What is the exact total of the reserve from previous years? This is the entire reason the granary system exists. It is not just for managing the annual surplus in times of plenty. It is a buffer against disaster in times of scarcity. The Joseph story from the Old Testament, of storing grain during 7 fat years to survive 7 lean years, perfectly captures the fundamental principle of the Egyptian state's economic strategy. The silo is a promise made in a good year that must be kept in a bad one. The first hard decisions are made. All non-minus essential projects are halted. The work on the Temple of Sobek is scaled back to only critical maintenance. No new obelisks are being commissioned. The state is entering a period of austerity. Every kernel of barley is now precious. Then, the ration lists are reviewed. You are tasked with recalculating the payrolls. The standard rations for state workers are cut, not by much, just a fraction, but enough to stretch the supply. A baker who used to receive 10 loaves a day now receives 9. It's an unpopular but necessary measure. You can feel the grumbling through the whole administration. A strange and specific type of document becomes critically important during this time, the letter. While you are used to dealing with ledgers and lists, the administration now relies on a constant stream of letters, written on papers and carried by official messengers, between your provincial granary and the central government in the capital. These letters are filled with urgent requests for information, reports on local conditions, and directives from the vizier's office. Archaeologists have found troves of these letters, and they provide a vivid, real-time look at the nervous system of the state during a crisis. You see one such letter on En's desk. It is from a neighboring province, one that was hit even harder by the low flood. They are requesting an emergency transfer of grain from your granary, which, due to its location, had a slightly better harvest. This sparks a tense debate among the senior officials. Can you afford to help? If you send grain away, will you have enough for your own people if the next flood is also poor? This is a question that historians still grapple with. How effective was the state at redistributing resources during a widespread famine? The system was designed to move grain along the Nile, but a nationwide crisis would stretch the system to its breaking point. Local governors would have been under immense pressure to hoard their own resources to protect their own people, potentially ignoring directives from the central government. The unity of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, was always fragile, and a famine could easily cause it to fracture along regional lines. In the end, the order comes down from the vizier. You are to send 20 hecats of barley north. You watch as the barges are loaded, each sack of grain representing a small piece of your province's security floating away down the river. It feels like you are losing a part of yourself. As the months wear on, the strain begins to show on the faces of the people. The local markets have less food, and the prices in barter have skyrocketed. A simple pottery jar that might have been traded for a handful of grain last year now costs 3 times that. You, as a state employee, are insulated from the worst of it by your albeit reduced rations. But you are a farmer's son. You know what your family and your old village are facing. The grain in your silo is no longer an abstract number on a papyrus sheet. It is the difference between life and death for thousands of people. One evening, you stand on the roof of a warehouse, looking out over the complex. The vast silos, which once seemed impossibly full, now feel fragile. They are no longer symbols of immense wealth, but of a desperate hope against a dry and unforgiving future. You have learned more about the true nature of power in this one lean year than in all the prosperous years before it. Power is not the ability to build monuments. It is the ability to keep a nation alive when the gods and the river turn their faces away. The lean year grinds on, and the tension that has settled over the province begins to curdle into something uglier, suspicion and crime. When resources are scarce, the bonds of community and the fear of authority begin to fray. It is during this time that you witness, from your privileged position within the granary walls, the workings of the ancient Egyptian legal system. The case begins with a discrepancy. A junior scribe, conducting a routine inventory check on a small, sealed storeroom containing high-minus quality emmer we reserve for the governor's household, finds that his count is off. The records, signed and sealed by another scribe just a month prior, state there should be 200 sacks. The new count shows only 194. 6 sacks have vanished into thin air. The seal on the door had been intact. This wasn't a crude break-minus-hint. This was an inside job. The implications are serious. It means a scribe with access to a seal has either stolen the grain himself or colluded with someone to do so, carefully replacing the seal to cover their tracks. This is a direct attack on the integrity of the entire system. An investigation is launched immediately, not by the granary guards, but by a special official sent from the office of the local magistrate. This is a key feature of the Egyptian legal system, the separation, at least in theory, between the administrative bureaucracy and the judiciary. The prime suspect is the scribe who last sealed the room, a man named Bokri. But there is also the guard who was on duty in that sector, and the 2 porters who helped Bok remove the sacks a month ago. All the men are brought before a makeshift court convened right there in the granary courtyard. The court is not what you might imagine. There is no robed judge sitting on a high bench. The proceedings are presided over by a panel of high-minus ranking local officials. Q&A. Your senior scribe is on the panel, as is the chief of the granary guards and the magistrate's deputy. The sad-minus hot nature of local courts is a well-minus documented historical fact. Justice was often administered by a council of respected local elders or officials, known as a kende. You are assigned the unenviable task of being the court reporter. You sit to one side with your papers and palette, your job being to create a verbatim transcript of the proceedings. These court records are incredibly valuable to historians, as they provide a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the lives, disputes, and language of ordinary people. The 4 accused men stand before the panel. The questioning begins. Bokri, the scribe, vehemently denies the charge. He insists he sealed the room correctly and that his records were accurate. He is articulate and confident. as you would expect from a scribe. The guard and the porters, men of a lower class, are less eloquent. They are clearly terrified, their denials stumbling and hesitant. The magistrate's deputy, who is leading the questioning, employs a clever tactic. He separates the men and questions them individually, asking them to recount the events of that day in minute detail. He is looking for inconsistencies in their stories. Where were you at midday? Who did you speak to? What did you eat for your meal? It's a classic interrogation technique, designed to catch a liar out. Then comes a peculiar and, to modern eyes, disturbing part of the process. The magistrate announces that the witnesses will be beaten on the feet and hands to ensure they are telling the truth. This use of corporal punishment during judicial proceedings is a documented, if unsettling, aspect of Egyptian justice. It wasn't necessarily seen as a punishment for the guilty, but as a method, a coercive tool to extract a truthful testimony from witnesses and defendants alike. Historians still debate the ethics and effectiveness of this. Did it produce truth? Or did it simply produce confessions from people desperate to make the pain stop? It's a dark and complex question. As the guard is taken aside, you hear a muffled cry. When he is brought back, he is limping, and his story has changed. He now remembers seeing Buckrey the scribe talking with one of the porters, a man named Koha, near the storeroom late in the evening, after the ceiling was supposed to have been completed. Now all eyes are on Koha, the porter. He breaks down completely, sobbing. He confesses he and Buckrey had a plan. After the official sealing, Buckrey returned, broke his own seal, and allowed Kaha to remove 6 sacks of the high-grade emmer. Well, then transported them out of the granary at night, hidden under a load of waste straw. Buckrey resealed the door, planning to alter the main ledger later to cover the loss. The high price of emmer on the black market was too great a temptation in this time of famine. The judgment is swift, the panel consults, and the verdict is delivered. The porter is sentenced to 100 strokes of the cane and is permanently conscripted into the state's quarrying gangs, a fate often considered worse than death. Buckrey, the scribe, receives a far more significant punishment. He is not only sentenced to a severe beating but is also stripped of his possession. He is reduced to the status of a cultivator, the ultimate disgrace for a member of the literate class. He will be sent back to the fields, his scribe's pallet broken, his name entered into a register of disgraced officials. The state has not only punished his crime but has erased his identity. As you finish writing the final lines of the court record, you are struck by the system's brutal efficiency. The crime was discovered, investigated, and punished within a matter of days. The stolen grain wasn't even the main issue. The real crime was the breach of trust, the corruption of the written record. The state had to make an example of Buckrey to reinforce the sanctity of the scribe's oath. You roll up the papiers, the official story of the fall of Buckrey the scribe. You are once again reminded of the precariances of your own position. The same tools that give you authority and a comfortable life can also be the instruments of your downfall. The line between being the one who writes the record and the one who is recorded as a criminal is perilously thin. The famine, though receding, has left a scar on the land and the community. The mood is somber, and there is a sense that the gods are displeased. In times like these, the religious duties of the granary become more important than ever. It's not enough to feed the people. The gods, too, must receive their due. You have always known that a portion of the granary stock is designated for the temples, but now you become directly involved in the process. The main temple in your province, the one dedicated to the crocodile god, Sobek, requires a steady stream of offerings. These are not just token amounts, they are a significant and regular withdrawal from the state's resources. Tuaneman assigns you to a new duty scribe of the offering stable. It's a temporary title, but it comes with a specific and sacred responsibility. Your job is to manage the inventory of grain destined for the gods and to ensure that the daily, weekly, and monthly offerings are delivered to the temple on time and in the correct quantities. This takes you out of the dusty courtyard of the granary and into the sacred precinct of the temple itself. The atmosphere here is completely different. The air is thick with the scent of incense, and the chaotic noise of the granary is replaced by the quiet chanting of priests and the echoing silence of vast, cool stone halls. You work with a high ranking priest, a lector priest who is responsible for the temple's rituals. He is an imposing figure, his head shown, his body draped in a leopard skin, a symbol of his office. He treats you not as a simple apprentice, but as a professional colleague. You are both servants in a cosmic bureaucracy, one serving the pharaoh, the other serving the gods. He shows you the offering list, a papier that details the precise requirements for each ritual. For the morning ceremony, the god's statue requires an offering of 12 loaves of bread made from the finest, pure stemmer wheat, and 4 jugs of beer from a special barley brew. These cannot be standard issue ration loaves. The grain must be perfect, free from any blight or impurity. Your first task is to go back to the granary and select this grain. This is a process filled with ceremony. You don't just scoop it from any silo. There is a special, smaller silo. Its door marked with sacred symbols, where the divine offering grain is stored. This is the absolute best of the harvest, set aside at the very beginning of the season. It is a mainstream historical fact that the temples controlled vast agricultural estates and received a significant portion of the national income, making them powerful economic engines in their own right. You unseal the sacred silo with a special seal used only for this purpose. You carefully measure out the required hecats, your hands moving with a new reverence. This grain is not for human consumption. It is destined to be transformed into food for the invisible gods. The act of measuring feels less like accounting and more like a religious rite. A weird, and rather wonderful, detail you learn from the lector priest is about the ultimate fate of these offerings. The gods, being spirits, do not physically consume the food. They absorb its spiritual essence, its kel. After the food has sat before the statue for a prescribed period and its essence has been consumed, the physical bread and beer are not thrown away. That would be incredibly wasteful. Instead, they undergo reversion of offerings. The food is taken by the priests as their payment. It is their salary for serving the god. So the highest quality food in Egypt ends up being eaten by the priesthood. It's a divinely sanctioned perk of the job. This system creates a whole secondary layer of accounting. You have to track the grain going from the granary to the temple. And then the priests have their own scribes to track the reverted offerings as they are distributed among the temple staff. It is a bureaucracy within a bureaucracy. The role of the gods in the economy is a subject of ongoing discussion among historians. Was the vast wealth diverted to the temples or drained on the state, as some have argued? Or was it, like the pyramids, an economic driver? The temples were major employers, commissioning work from artisans, laborers, and farmers. They also served as centers of learning and, in some cases, as emergency banks or redistribution centers during famines. The line between church and state was almost non-existent. The granary feeding the temple and the temple feeding its priests was all part of one single, integrated system designed to maintain the cosmic order. One day, you are responsible for overseeing a major delivery for a special festival. A huge quantity of wheat, barley, honey, figs, and wine is required. You spend days preparing the withdrawal orders, coordinating the porters, and ensuring every last item is correct. As the procession of offerings, carried on the shoulders of priests in training, makes its way from the granary to the temple, you feel a profound sense of satisfaction. You have fulfilled your duty to the gods. The lector priest, seeing your diligence, gives you a small gift, a tiny, faience amulet of a scarab beetle, glazed in a brilliant blue. It's a token of thanks, but for you, it's much more. It's an acknowledgement of your place in this sacred economy. That night, you hold the small amulet in your hand. You think about the journey of a single kernel of wheat. It grew in a farmer's field, was delivered to the granary as a tax, recorded by you on papiers, selected for its purity, ground into flour at the temple bakery, baked into bread, offered to an invisible god, and finally eaten by a priest. It is a journey that encompasses every aspect of Egyptian civilization agriculture. bureaucracy, religion, and economy. And you, the scribe, are the one who charts its course and makes it all possible. Years have passed since you first walked through the granary gates, a nervous boy with calloused hands. The famine has receded into memory, replaced by a series of good harvests. Your master, in Illinois, has been promoted and transferred to the regional office of the vizier, a significant step up. And now, the moment you have worked for tirelessly has finally come. Governor N.E.B. Amon summons you to his office. This is only the second time you have ever been in his presence. His office is spacious and airy, with a painted frieze along the top of the walls. He does not ask you to sit. He looks at you, his expression thoughtful, and then he looks at a papers on his desk, a recommendation from an NI. You have served your apprenticeship well. N.E.B. Amon says, his voice a low rumble. You have learned the numbers, the letters, and the laws of this place. The rank of apprentice is no longer fitting. He pushes a small wooden box across the desk towards you. You open it. Inside, nestled on a bed of linen, is your own scribe's kit. It's not a fancy one. The palette is of simple acacia wood, not ivory. The water pot is plain clay, not faience, but it is yours. More importantly, next to it lies a small, stone cylinder shield, carved with your own name, the name your parents gave you, which you now write with practice seasoned, your new title, scribe of the granary. It is an overwhelming moment. You have officially arrived. You are no longer an assistant, a gopher, a student. You are a recognized, salaried official of the state. You will now sign your own name to documents. Your word, written in ink, will have legal weight. The journey from the dusty fields to this polished office is complete. Your promotion is a concrete example of the social mobility that, while difficult, was possible in ancient Egypt. A mainstream historical view is that the bureaucracy, along with the army, was one of the few ladders a commoner could climb. By demonstrating skill, diligence, and loyalty, a man from a humble background could achieve a position of comfort and influence. You are living proof of that path. Your first assignment as a full-fledged scribe is both a test and a symbol of your new status. You are given responsibility for a specific sector of the granary's operations, the House of the Northern Barley. This means you are now in charge of 3 specific silos and the 2 scribal apprentices assigned to them. You are, for the first time, the master. You walk to your new domain, carrying your precious scribe's kit. The 2 apprentices, boys no older than you were when you started, look at you with the same mixture of fear and awe that you once directed at an NI. It's a strange feeling, being on the other side. You try to emulate the better qualities of your former master. You are strict, demanding precision and accuracy, but you also take the time to explain the why behind the calculations, something in NI rarely did. You show them how a small error in a PE-SU calculation can lead to a real -world shortage, and you teach them the importance of a clear, legible hand. One of your new responsibilities is dealing with arrears, the unpaid taxes from previous years. You have to go through the old ledgers, like the one where Q.N. Amon made a note about the farmer with the pest miners infested fields, and decide if this year's good harvest means they can finally pay their debt. This involves a delicate negotiation, a skill you learn it by observation. You have to be firm enough to collect the state's due, but flexible enough not to drive a productive family into poverty over a past misfortune. A weird and wonderfully bureaucratic problem you now have to deal with is the OS Reckon archive. Over the years, the granary has accumulated mountains of these pottery shards covered in temporary notes, calculations, and drafts. They are the scrap paper of ancient Egypt. While most are worthless, once the information is transferred to papers, some contain important details or drafts of letters. It is now your job to sort through them, deciding what can be thrown out and what should be kept. Archaeologists would one day find these rubbish pits of Ostrakhan rejoice, as they provide an intimate, day-to-day look at life that the formal, official Pappy wrote unleft. As you sort through a pile of old shards, you find one of your own from your first year, covered in clumsy, poorly formed symbols. You smile, It feels like a message from a different person, a ghost from your past. This transition from apprentice to master is a subject of some historical debate. Was there a formal test or ceremony involved? Or was it simply a matter of a superior's recommendation? As in your case, the evidence is scarce. Some scholars point to literary texts that describe students being examined, while others argue that in a practical setting like a granary, a master would simply know when his apprentice was ready. Your own experience suggests the latter. Your final exam was the years of work you had already completed successfully. The biggest change, however, is your perspective. You are no longer just responsible for a single task. You are responsible for a system. You have to think ahead, anticipating the demand for certain types of grain, scheduling maintenance for your silos, and managing the workflow of your apprentices. You are not just a cog in the machine anymore. You are a junior engineer, responsible for keeping a small part of it running smoothly. One afternoon, you see a young farmer, his face etched with anxiety, standing before one of your apprentices, arguing over a cow. It's a scene you know intimately, but now you see it from the other side of the poet. You are the one in the shade. You are the one with the clean kilt. You have become the figure you once looked upon with such a confusing mixture of fear and aspiration, and you feel the full weight of that position, not just its power, but its profound and unending responsibility. Your new role as a fully fledged scribe quickly moves beyond the familiar walls of the granary. The grain you manage doesn't just sit in the silos. It moves, and the primary highway for this movement is the great river that is the source of all life in Egypt, the Nile. You are now tasked with coordinating the logistics of shipping, turning your neat columns of figures on papiers into actual barges laden with food. The order comes down from the governor's office. The army is massing for a campaign in Nubia to the south, to quell an uprising and secure the trade routes. A massive quantity of grain, barley for the soldiers, beer and bread, and fodder for the chariot horses and donkeys must be transported from your provincial granary to the military staging point at the First Cataract. Your silo complex, being a major hub in Middle Egypt, is a key part of this supply chain. This is a logistical challenge of a whole new magnitude. You are no longer just releasing a few hundred sacks for the local temple. You are orchestrating the movement of thousands of he-cats over a distance of hundreds of miles. Your first job is to requisition the boats. You don't just walk down to the docks and hire the first available barge. The state maintains a fleet of transport vessels, and you must liaise with another scribe, a specialist from the department of the Royal Fleet. His entire world is one of boat maintenance schedules, crew assignments, and river navigation charts. You sent him a formal request on papiers, detailing the amount of cargo, the destination, and the required time limit. This reliance on river transport is a core historical truth about Egypt. The Nile was the interstate highway, the internet, and the railway system all rolled into one. Heavy goods like grain and stone could be moved with far greater ease by boat than by endless trains of donkeys. The rhythm of the state pulsed along this artery, with official barges constantly moving up and down the river, carrying goods, officials, and messages. The scribe from the fleet department writes back, confirming the assignment of 5 large transport barges. But his letter comes with a warning. The current is strong at this time of year, and travel south, against the flow of the river, will be slow. The journey will rely on sail power, and if the prevailing northerly wind fails, the crews will have to row or tow the barges from the riverbank, significantly increasing the travel time. You have to factor this contingency into your schedule. Next, you must organize the labor. Getting thousands of sacks from the silos to the riverside port is a monumental task. You coordinate with the chief of the porters, calculating how many man-minus hours will be required. You authorize extra rations of beer for the workers as an incentive, a common practice to encourage effort during demanding tasks. The courtyard becomes a scene of organized chaos as a human chain of laborers creates a river of grain sacks, flowing from the silo mouths to the waiting boats. Here you encounter a fascinating and quirky piece of Egyptian life, the boatmen. They are a class of people unto themselves, known for being rough, loud, and fiercely independent. They have their own songs, their own slang, on their own particular superstitions. You overhear their captain arguing with a priest about the proper offering to make to Happy, the god of the Nile, to ensure a safe journey. Getting the grain onto the boats is one thing. Ensuring the boatmen are willing and able to get it to its destination is another. Historians often abate the level of central control over this river traffic. While the state and temples owned large fleets, there was also a significant private sector of boat owners who could be hired or conscripted for state service. The relationship between the state bureaucracy and these private operators was complex. Was it a straightforward commercial transaction, or was it a coercive demand for service? Surviving documents, like contracts and letters of complaint, suggest it was a messy combination of both. As the last sack is loaded, your final and most important task begins. You must prepare the shipping manifest. This is not just a simple list. It is a detailed document, prepared in triplicate. One copy will travel with the boat captain. One will be sent ahead to the military scribes at the destination. Then one will remain with you in the granary archives. The manifest details the exact number of sacks of barley on demo, the total weight, the number of hecats, the names of the boats, the captain of the lead boat, and the date of departure. You seal the captain's copy with your own personal seal. This paper is now the legal identity of the cargo. If the shipment arrives with fewer sacks than stated on the manifest, the captain will be held responsible. It is the linchpin of the entire operation, the thread of accountability that stretches the length of the river. You stand on the quay and watch as the 5 barges, laden low in the water, are untoy. The great sails of cream-colored linen are hoisted, catching the wind. The boats slowly, majestically, begin to move south. You watch until they are just specks on the horizon. A huge part of your granary's wealth is now floating on the water, entrusted to the winds and the skill of a few grumpy boatmen. You feel a strange sense of detachment. The grain, which you have so meticulously counted and guarded, is now completely out of your control. All you have left is the copy of the manifest in your hand. The paper goes to the real thing. You have done your part. You have translated a military need into a logistical reality. Now, you can only wait for a letter to arrive weeks from now, hopefully bearing the seal of a military scribe, confirming that the shipment has arrived safely and the soldiers have their bread. The successful shipment of grain to the army in Nubia elevates your standing within the granary. You have proven you can handle complex, large-scale logistics. This new reputation brings with it a new set of responsibilities, ones that expand your worldview from the provincial to the national. You are now initiated into the great, invisible web of the state's tranquil network. Your granary, you learn, is not an island. It is one of many, a node in a vast network of silos and storehouses that stretches the entire length of the 2 lands, from the marshes of the delta to the rocky shores of the first cataract. And the lifeblood of this network is communication. Your primary tool for this is the letter, carried by official messengers. These aren't personal notes. They are formal, administrative communications, written on papers in a standardized format. You begin to receive and send letters to scribes and other granaries, some in towns you have never even heard of. This correspondence is the nervous system of the Egyptian economy, allowing the state to monitor food supplies, anticipate shortages, and shift resources across the country. A typical letter arrives from a scribe named Thutmose in the city of Abydos, 100 miles to the south. He is requesting a reconciliation of accounts. His records show that he transferred a surplus of 5 thorough hecats of emmer wheat to your granary after the last harvest. Your records show the receipt of only 850 hecats. There is a discrepancy of 150 hecats. This is a common problem. Your job is to investigate. You pull the original shipping manifest from that delivery. You check the records of the measurement process when the grain arrived. You discover the discrepancy was noted at the time of arrival and attributed to loss in transit, a combination of spillage, rodent activity on the barge, and perhaps a bit of customary skimming by the boatman. You write a formal letter back to Thutmose, quoting from your daily records and citing the name of the official who supervised the unloading. You're having a long distance, a synchronous argument with a man you will probably never meet. a debate conducted entirely through dried ink on plant fiber. This interdecadence of the Granaries is a well-established historical fact, pieced together from surviving administrative archives, like the heat UNHT papier. These documents show a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of regional supply and demand, with officials moving grain from surplus regions to deficit regions with considerable foresight. But this system also has its quirks. A weird and frustrating part of your job is dealing with the lack of standardization in local record minus keeping. While the state tries to impose a uniform system, different regions, and even different scribes have their own little habits and shortcuts. The scribe in Abydos might use a slightly different symbol for spoilage than you do. A granary in the Delta might measure its beer rations using a different sized jug. A significant part of your job becomes translation, not of language, but of bureaucratic dialects. You have to learn the quirks of your colleagues up and down the river to make sure you are all talking about the same thing. This leads to a fascinating historical debate: how centralized was the Egyptian state in reality? The official ideology, and the view from the capital, was one of absolute, monolithic control. The pharaoh's word was law, and the vizier's decrees were to be implemented uniformly across the land. However, the logistical challenges of communication and travel in the ancient world meant that provincial governors and officials had a great deal of practical autonomy. The letters you are sending show a system that was less a rigid pyramid and more a negotiated network. The central government could issue orders, but their successful implementation depended on the cooperation and competence of hundreds of local officials like you. One day, you receive a different kind of letter. It's not a routine data check. It is a general directive, a copy of which has been sent to every major granary in Upper Egypt. It comes from the office of the overseer of the granaries of Upper and Lower Egypt, your ultimate boss in the capital. The letter details a new method for calculating the expected spoilage rate based on the age and type of silo. It includes complex fractional calculations on the standardized table to be used for all future reports. The state is attempting to impose a new layer of standardization to make the data it receives from the provinces more consistent and reliable. You and the other scribes in your office spend days studying the new directive. You argue about the meaning of certain phrases and run test calculations on your ostraca. It's a major bureaucratic overhaul, and it's being implemented entirely through the mail. As you painstakingly copy the new spoilage table onto a fresh sheet of papers to be hung on the office wall, you feel a powerful sense of connection. At this very moment, dozens of other scribes in offices just like yours, in cities and towns all along the Nile, are doing the exact same thing. You're all part of one vast, coordinated machine. Your individual actions, your careful calculations, are what allow the vizier to sit in his palace in Thebes and have a reasonably accurate picture of the nation's food supply. The letters are more than just data. They are the threads that bind the kingdom together. They transform a collection of disparate agricultural regions into a single, functioning economic entity. The network is slow, it is prone to error, and it is dependent on the whims of the wind and the entrance of its messengers. But it works, and you are a master of one of its most important junctions, a keeper of the nation's larder and a weaver of the invisible web of state power. Your understanding of the granary's role expands once again, moving beyond the borders of Egypt itself. You learn that the grain you manage is not just an internal resource. It is a tool of international diplomacy and trade. The surplus of the Nile doesn't just feed Egypt. It projects the pharaoh's power and influence across the ancient Near East. The order arrives via a high-priority messenger from the royal court. It is a directive from the office of the vizier, but the details make it clear it originates with the pharaoh himself. The Hittite Empire, a major rival power far to the north in Anatolia, has suffered a severe drought and famine. To avert war and stabilize the region and perhaps to show off his own wealth and magnanimity, the pharaoh has agreed to send a massive shipment of grain as a gift to the Hittite king. This is not commercial sale. It is for an aid as a strategic political maneuver. This event is not fictional. Historical records, both Egyptian and Hittite, document that Pharaoh Mani taught it exactly this in the late 13th century BCE, sending a huge shipment of grain to the famine-stricken Hittites, his former enemies, is a prime example of grain diplomacy. The logistical challenge is immense, far greater than shipping supplies to your own army in Nubia. The grain must be loaded onto sea-going vessels, not river barges, at a port in the Nile Delta. This means a portion of the shipment must come from your granary, be transported downriver to the delta, and then loaded onto these larger, more robust ships for the perilous journey across the Great Green, as you call the Mediterranean Sea. You are tasked with preparing the southern portion of this relief shipment. The calculations are complex. You have to select the oldest viable grain, first in, first out policy to ensure the state's reserves are kept as fresh as possible. You must also arrange for the river transport, coordinating with the royal fleet scribes for a whole flotilla of barges to make the journey north. As you work, you overhear the senior scribes discussing the implications. This is a power move. A kingdom that can give away this much food, especially to a rival, is demonstrating incredible strength and stability. It sends a message to every other king and chieftain in the region. Egypt is prosperous. Egypt is eternal. Egypt is the master of its own destiny. A strange and specific detail of this process is the need for diplomatic scribes. The shipping manifest and any accompanying letters cannot be written in simple Egyptian hieratic. They must be written in Akkadian, the international language of diplomacy for this entire period. It was the English of the ancient Near East, used for correspondence between the great powers. This requires a highly specialized scribe from the Foreign Office, who travels to the port to prepare the final documents. You, for all your skill, are illiterate in the face of international politics. While this particular shipment is a gift, you learn that grain is also a major export commodity. Merchants, some acting as agents of the state and others as private entrepreneurs, regularly purchase grain from the royal granaries to trade for goods that Egypt lacks. They might sail to Lebanon to trade your barley for fine cedar wood, which is needed for building temple doors and ceremonial barges. They might travel to Crete to trade wheat for decorated pottery and olive oil. This raises a key historical debate: to what extent was the Egyptian economy a state-controlled monopoly versus a burgeoning free market? The traditional view held that almost all foreign trade was centrally controlled by the pharaoh. However, more recent scholarships suggests a more mixed economy, where private merchants, under license from the state, played a significant role. The grain they traded was purchased from you, a state official, and you had to record the transaction, charging them a price set by the administration. This price was likely paid in silver, gold, or other valuable goods, which then became part of the state treasury. You are responsible for one such transaction. A well-known merchant, a man named Tchepu, who owns his own fleet of ships, arrives with a permit from the vizier to purchase a large quantity of MOE. He is not paying with sacks of grain, but with sacks of small silver pieces, a form of proto-minus currency. Your job is to weigh the silver using the temple's official scales, a process as meticulous as measuring grain. You have to record the transaction, not in the cats of grain paid, but in the bands of silver received. This is a whole new kind of accounting for you, linking the agricultural wealth of the Nile Valley to the world of precious metals and international commerce. You watch as Tchepu's workers load your grain onto his barges. You know that in a few months, this very wheat could be baked into bread in a city on the coast of Syria, a place you can barely imagine. It feels strange, seeing this fundamental piece of Egypt being sold and sent away. But you also see what comes back. On his return journey, Tchepu's ships will be laden with the timber, copper, incense, and luxury goods that the Egyptian elite desire. The granary is not just a storehouse. It is a converter, turning the monotonous, renewable wealth of the fields into the rare, exotic goods of the wider world. It is the engine at the heart of Egypt, Tess import-export business. You look at the two records side by side. One details the gift of grain to the starving Hittites, a gesture of pure political power. The other records the sale of grain to a private merchant, an act of pure economic trade, you realize that the humble kernel of wheat is the most versatile tool the pharaoh possesses. It can be a salary, a tax, a weapon, a gesture of peace, or a commodity for trade. It is the universal currency that fuels every aspect of Egyptian life, from the farmer's simple meal to the grand strategies of empire. The years flow by like the Nile itself, some swift and bountiful, others slow and meager. You are no longer the young scribe, proud of his first pallet. You are now a man in middle age, your hair beginning to thin, your face lined with the faint wrinkles of constant, careful thought. Your name, once written with a student's hesitancy, is now a mark of established authority, known and respected throughout the province. Governor N.E.B. Amon has grown old and retired to his family estates. Tyrann Amon, the senior scribe who was once your imposing superior, has taken his place as governor, and the position of controller of the granary, the chief scribe who manages the entire operation, is now vacant. You are summoned to the governor's office, the very room where you were once interrogated by the royal inspector, where you received your first scribal kit. This time, you are offered a seat. Tyrann Amon, your old boss, looks at you with a familiar, weary expression. The burdens of high office have aged him. The ledgers have become too heavy for me to carry alone, he says, a rare attempt at a joke. The granary needs a chief scribe who knows it from the foundation to the roof, who understands the moods of the river and the excuses of the farmers, who can tell the difference between a real problem and a poorly written report. He slides the papers across the desk. It is an official decree, bearing his seal as governor. It names you as the new controller. It is the highest position a career scribe can realistically hope to attain in a provincial administration. You are now the master of the entire complex, the man to whom all other scribes, including ambitious young apprentices, will report. The promotion is not a surprise, but it feels profound. You think of the day you first walked into this place, a boy reeking of the fields, overwhelmed by the scale and the noise. Now, you will command it. Your perspective shifts dramatically. You no longer manage a single silo or a single shipment. You manage the entire system. Your concerns are no longer about the daily count, but about the annual trend. You spend your days not just writing records, but reading them, analyzing them, looking for patterns. You compare the harvest yields from the northern plains of your province to the southern valleys. You analyze spoilage rates across different types of silos. You are no longer just practicing bureaucracy. You are engaged in data analysis. This big picture view is the hallmark of a successful high-level administrator. It's a mainstream historical concept that the stability of the Egyptian state depended on officials who could think strategically, using the vast amounts of data collected by junior scribes to make informed decisions about resource allocation. One of your first tasks is to approve a major renovation project, the complete dismantling and rebuilding of one of the oldest beehive-shaped silos. You study the maintenance records for the past 20 years, noting the increasing frequency of repairs for cracks and pest infestations. Your calculations show that the annual loss of grain from this one failing silo now outweighs the cost of rebuilding it. You write the order, authorizing the expenditure and the labor, your signature at the bottom making it a reality. You are shaping the very physical landscape of the institution you serve. A weird, and rather lonely, aspect of your new job is that you spend less time with people and more time with papers. Your days are filled with reports, letters from the capital, legal petitions from farmers, and budget requests from other departments. You are becoming a master of the abstract, the physical grain, the dusty courtyard, the shouts of the porters. These are all things you now experience through the filter of a written summary. You have to remind yourself to walk the complex every day, to see the reality behind the numbers, lest you become just another remote official who has forgotten the smell of barley. This leads to a quiet debate you have with yourself, a debate that mirrors one among historians. Is it better for a leader to be a specialist who rose through the ranks, like you, with deep practical knowledge of the details? Or is it better for a leader to be a generalist, a nobleman appointed from the outside, with broader political connections, but less understanding of the day minus to minus day work? The Egyptian system used both. You are the product of one path, a testament to meritocracy. But many provincial governors were nobles from the royal court, a testament to the importance of political loyalty. Which system was ultimately more effective is a question with no simple answer. Your relationship with the grain itself has changed. You no longer see individual kernels. You see assets. You see futures. You see national security. You sit on the roof of the main warehouse, the same place you stood as a frightened apprentice during the famine, and you look out over your domain. The rows of silos are like pieces on a game board, the Senate board of the Egyptian state. Your job is to play the game well, to move the pieces strategically to protect your king and your kingdom. You see a young scribe below, carefully supervising the unloading of a farmer's donkey, his face a mask of intense concentration. You see yourself in him. You understand his anxiety, his ambition, his fear of making a mistake. You have walked every step of the path that lies before him. You are no longer just a participant in the system. You are its guardian, its memory, and its guide. The weight of this responsibility is heavier than any sack of grain, but you carry it with a sense of quiet, hard minus one pride. From your high office, you watch the seasons turn, and you realize you are no longer just living through them. You are observing a great, repeating pattern. The world you command is a cyclical one, a microcosm of the grander cycles of the cosmos of birth, death, and rebirth. You watch a new generation of farmers arrive at their gates. They are the sons of the men you dealt with when you were